Oh, well.
Get the show on the road. Did you get started?
Well, after.
Oh, it's a cute photo.
Y'all ready?
Where's Frankie's coming?
We recorded that. That's all right.
So
So I will call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Oregon City Commission for Wednesday, August 7th, 2019. We had an exec session prior to this meeting of the City Commission pursuant to ORS 192.602D to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. And 2H, to consult with counsel regarding the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle-Smith. Here. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff. And Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. If you'll please stand and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, under ceremonies and proclamations, we're going to just have one thing. I am making appointments to, where'd they go? Oh, you took them back, didn't you?
No, it's
Oh, here we go. Here we go. So appointing Bob LaSalle as a Park Place Neighborhood Association alternate representative to the Citizen Involvement Committee for the remainder of the two-year term ending December 31st, 2019. And appointment of John Keys as the Caulfield Neighborhood Association primary representative to the Citizen Involvement Committee for the remainder of the two-year term ending December 31st, 2019. And with that, we're back to the agenda. We're at citizen comment. And I currently have two, Mark Matheson and Dorothy Dalsrud.
Thought I'd get some time. Okay. Don't let me know when the timer starts.
You got a box right in front of you, so go ahead.
Okay. I am here tonight because on September 12th,
Could you
2000.
identify yourself, please?
I am here tonight because I am, on September 12th, 2016, the city of Oregon City illegally used a stop work order to seize my property and held it for over 22 months. This action kept my wife and I from earning a living and has put our lives in jeopardy. For 22 months, my wife and I were prisoners in our own home. The city even slapped us with a $71,400 fine. I am here tonight to inform the public, city officials are lying to them. I am here tonight because the city has flatly refused to consider negotiating a settlement. The evidence clearly shows the city code enforcement team lied under oath during the municipal trial. It's tragic, but the city officials lied to build their case against us. Using the public's money, the city has hired 7 government attorneys from 3 fully staffed law firms to defend the city's illegal actions. On April 4th, Karen Moran said the city code enforcement manager, Nancy Bush, likes to talk trash. Nancy Bush even agreed. City manager Tony Conkle sanctioned this nonsense. On December 29th, 2017, Honorable Judge Susie L. Norby reversed the municipal court decision for the illegal property seizure. It ordered the city to remove the forced imprisonment we endured for 22 months. Unfortunately, the judge's decision did not remove the targets off on our back. Just so there is no misunderstanding, Judge Norby's decision specifically said, without substantial evidence in the record to support that conclusion, the conclusion about the lawful of the stop work order is also irreparably compromised, which means the city lost their appeal and cannot claim their actions were legal. Here are the facts and evidence that's submitted to the court. City officials lied about Ed Lindquist, Brian Boyce, and I being kicked off the OSC landslide incident. They lied about the lease agreement for the Oregon City Armory. They lied when they slapped my wife and I with 4 meritless code violation letters against us within 11 months. City officials covertly interfered with my presentation for an exclusive emergency management workshop from the state of Oregon. They conspired with 2 other agencies to sign a slanderous cease and desist letter targeting my career. They lied about Nicholas Cruz threatening to burn down our house. The police refused to file a report. They lied about a 911 call coming from inside of the house. The police did not file a report. They lied to disrupt my commercial interest in the United States and Australia. And last but not least, the city destroyed public records to hide their malfeasance. The court is currently reviewing the evidence of all these. I am here as someone who is devoted to his career to serving the public. I am here requesting the city's elected official to review the letter sent by your attorneys, admittedly, adamantly refusing the consideration revolving the litigation. This decision is yours, not your attorneys. Thank you for your time to clarify the record. As you see here, this is the evidence. This is the evidence that over the last 3
Thank you,
years
sir.
that we, thank you.
Dorothy?
Hello, my name is Dorothy Dahlstra. I live in Oregon City, and I've lived in here since 1978. I'm here to speak not on what's on the agenda tonight. There's plenty enough to speak about. Don't need me. I'm here to bring attention to what's going to come forward on your agenda. There has been many hours of very wonderful people on the NRC that are helping rewrite our tree code, our heritage tree code. And I encourage you to listen to the changes and embrace it. We used to be able to, and one specific part is having an arborist report. We have plenty of people in this town that can look at a tree and tell whether it's healthy or not. And sometimes when a tree gets old, it gets diseased. And if they can have an arborist at that point say this tree is too unhealthy to remain standing, and I think it could be cut down. The point is that we used to not have to have an arborist report. We had a tree blow down that was a heritage tree that I think that generated that need for an arborist report. That tree was already being well taken care of, cabled, and already had an arborist loving it. However, a little hole in the middle of a tree you can't see is there. And sometimes it just can't stand it, and the tree outlived its life. Since then, not one other tree has been nominated as a heritage tree because we have been shackled. It is a huge financial barrier on a citizen to have a tree that they wish to remain and honor, to have an arborist come and make a report that could cost them anywhere from $200 to $1,000, depending if there's something needs to be done to the tree. A wonderful example is our Episcopal Cemetery. They have restored all of their oaks. Wish they would come in and make it a heritage grove. I'm working on them. But I think if we look at some of the areas that we have that we can show as a city that we honor our trees, because we're a city of trees. We have our Pioneer Cemetery. We have wonderful sequoias up there that we can nominate. We're revamping the cemetery. We can honor those trees. I'm into even naming them after people. However, that can go sideways too. So I can understand why some people don't want to nominate a tree. I want to put every Dorothy Marsh on every tree. However, some people want to, you never know what's going to come up. One could be called diddly-do. But anyway, I just encourage you to think about our heritage trees. We are a city of trees. Please consider removing some of the barriers and consider upping the ante if you remove the tree. Because right now you can remove a tree, a heritage tree, and I think you're only whacked with a $300 fine. I would encourage you to put another 0 behind that. It doesn't hurt anybody. The person who would think about it would be the one forward. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, then we'll move on. Everybody okay with the agenda?
Yes.
All right. So moving on to public hearings, this is 6A 19-459, Resolution 19-13, Modification Planning Division Fee Schedule. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. The Planning Division has proposed changes to our fee schedule. The changes are proposed to add more transparency to the fees that people pay, to recover costs for services that we don't currently charge for, and also to reflect the changes for the recent amendments to the Oregon City Municipal Code. In some cases, some fees were reduced and removed, but in most cases, you'll see new fees or changes to existing fees. We did receive some emails that didn't get put to the commission, so at this point, I wanted to enter it into the record. You've seen them, and they should be on the dais before you as well. We've discussed, correct, Claudia?
Yeah, they're on your computer dice.
Oh, the computer, my apologies. We've discussed the fee amendments both at a work session and at a hearing, both in July of this year. At those times, the public as well as the city commission identified a couple of issues they wanted to address further, particularly the fee for planning commission appeals. Currently, the fee for planning commission appeals is $3,763 plus actual city attorney fees. And staff had proposed a flat rate, and that was to create transparency. So when an appellant submitted an appeal, they knew how much they were going to pay, since the cost of city attorney's fees is unknown before you start the review process. So in order to figure out that flat rate, staff utilized an average of the actual city attorney costs for the last 10 years. Within the last 10 years, the city processed 3 planning commission appeals. The first one was for the original Public Works Master Plan, and that was $7,795 for just the city attorney portion. Then we had the Wheeler Farm subdivision. That was $7,919.50 for just the city attorney portion. And then we lastly had the Abernathy Hotel and Master Plan, and that was $4,427.50 for just the city attorney portion. So we averaged those 3 together to get $6,714. To that, we added our base fee of $3,763, resulting in a total cost, an actual cost of the city of averages of $10,477. That base fee is based on $100 for noticing, as well as 41 hours of staff time to do the noticing, hold a hearing, create a staff report, and all of those tasks to complete the appeal. The commission has identified concern with this appeal because of the cost of $10,477, which again is the cost of us to process it. And so the commission has options to not change the existing appeal fee, change the existing appeal fee to reflect the actual staff time, or you can subsidize that appeal fee through the general fund if you like as well, which is sort of what the commission had been talking about, but didn't quite land on any particular number there. If you do subsidize any fees, they would come through from the general fund to the planning division to subsidize those costs. We don't have any line items identified to provide that fee, but I did talk to finance department a little bit about it. I wanted to provide a suggestion to the commission because it sounded like you did want to subsidize the cost of the appeal fee for appellants. Right now, it's that base fee plus the actual city attorney cost. If you just retain the base fee of $3,763, then that would be a subsidy of 64%, or a little over $6,700 to the applicants. Finance identified that based on the 3 appeals that we have in the last 10 years, if we keep at that rate, that amount would be palatable for the general fund to subsidize the appeals. But again, the choice is yours. If you want to do nothing and not change it, reflect our actual city costs, or subsidize it from the general fund. The other fee that there was concern over was the Historic Review Board. We had a request, staff had not proposed to amend the Historic Review Board appeal fee of $50. We did have a recommendation from the City Commission to alter that fee to recover more costs. And I applied the same methodology for Historic Review Board as we did for City Commission. So that base fee of how much it costs us to notice and conduct a hearing and do the report, as well as the average of city attorney costs on those appeals. We had 7 appeals from that. Averaging those, we got a lower number of $6,460. Again, there was concern I heard from the commission regarding the appeal fee of nearly $6,500 for Historic Review Board. If you want to apply the same rate of Planning Commission subsidy that you do to Historic Review Board subsidy, that's 64% of the fee, then the resulting cost would be $2,325. I have the fee sheet that we have proposed before you on the dais. That's the clean version. You have the ability to accept it or revise it as much as you would like tonight. I am here to answer any questions that you have. We have a lot of information and comments in the record. We believe that we have responses to those already in the record. You saw a couple of memos from the city attorney, or assistant city attorney, and myself in there, but we're here to help you with anything that you need.
So before I open the public hearing, does the commission have any questions for Ms. Turway?
I think I'd like to hear the public input first.
Okay.
My comment, can you please share with the public what you share with me via email on your research about other jurisdictions and how they are calculating their fees?
Yes, Commissioner Smith had asked me to reach out to other jurisdictions. So we had comparative jurisdictions just to provide a frame of reference. We know that we charge a fees based on what they cost, and then you can subsidize them if you want to, whether actual or average fees. And those fees must be reasonable. So we reached back out to the 11 example other jurisdictions that we had identified, and we now have heard back from all of them. It turns out, no surprise, that there's a variety of people that do a variety of things. You saw in the fee sheet that we provided, some people do flat rates, and sometimes those flat rates are high, and sometimes they're very low. Some jurisdictions make an effort to subsidize appeal fees. There's others that make an effort to, like Happy Valley wants to recover all actual city costs. And then there's others that set a flat rate, but they set it relatively high to discourage people from appealing, but rather encouraging them to participate before decisions are made. One thing to note is all these appeal fees, we're talking about public hearings, so there's opportunity for the public to participate along the way. Some cities have city attorneys on staff, so they're not listed as an additional charge. There's other cities that also do what we do, where they do additional city attorney charge. There is some cities that do a percentage of the original fee application. We've learned that those fee application percentages, their original fee costs are relatively low. And so thus the resulting costs is about what we're suggesting. And there's some that do a percentage of a fee cost, but then have a cap on it as well. So you can cut this piece of pie any way you want. The important thing is that you cannot charge more than how much they cost us to review. And the cost for Planning Commission is about $10,500, and for Historic Review Board is about $6,500.
Okay.
So I'd like to ask Ms. Turway two
I thought
questions.
you wanted to have the public testimony first.
Well, I can wait then, sure.
I'll open the public hearing. And I have at least two on here, Bob LaSalle and Jim Nacita.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Bob LaSalle, and I live in Oregon City. During the last commission meeting, it was quite obvious that not only the public, but also the commissioners were not happy with the proposed fee for a planning commission decision appeal. It was also obvious that alternatives were desired. I've found none, and apparently no attempt was made to provide them. I went through in great detail the proposed planning fee schedule to be effective August 2nd, the changed planning fee schedule, and Exhibit A, the revised fee schedule, to be effective August 7th. I've found nothing different in regard to the Planning Commission or Historic Review Board fees. There is a new fee for compatibility review type 2 for $892, whatever that is. And the Historic Review new construction fails to have the formula to calculate the fee beyond the base fee, which should read plus 2.5% of the construction cost. I'd like to refer to my experience as a commissioned officer in the Army. As a staff officer, you're required to give your commander at least 2 alternatives for each situation. And that works. Staff has not offered any alternatives, and if I were a commissioner, I'd be offended. There's a memo from Carrie Richter dated July 23rd, 2017. Now, I don't know how she knew this subject was going to come up 2 years ago. But anyway, I question why it takes 6 pages of legalese at $200 to $300 an hour to say the proposed fee schedule is justified. It seems a little overkill to me, and unless something's done to control legal fees, they'll continue to have free rein to continue with ridiculous documents such as that. A simple 1 to 2 page explanation would have been just fine, and more detail could be provided if necessary. Item 40 of the Planning Division fee explanation states the hourly fee charged is $85 an hour. Actual computations of that document shows charges of $75 to $86.90 per hour. The base fee for a Planning Commission appeal of $3,763 equates to 44 hours of staff time. That's over a week of full-time work to research something that's already been documented. I also question that $85 an hour. That equates to a base wage of $64 an hour plus 33% for benefits, or a base wage of $56 an hour plus 50% for benefits. It looks like the city might be inadvertently figuring in a profit here for work we taxpayers are already paying for. As a senior manager, and I'd like to ask just for a few more lines.
Go ahead.
As a senior manager in business, I found that good management of labor is a major factor in efficient operations. At the risk of offending staff management, it looks to me like efficient labor management might be a subject for improvement. I ask that you approve the planning fee schedule with the exception of the fees for Planning Commission and Historic Review Board appeals. You could go into great detail of the entire document, but it wouldn't reap any appreciable benefits. The appeals in question are an affront to the sensibilities of the average person and shouldn't be allowed. Thanks for your time, and I offer a copy of my testimony for the record.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Ancia.
Good evening, James Nasita. I live in Oregon City. I've sent you all a fair amount of material over the past several days, and I don't have much to add beyond that. I'll just make a couple of points and requests. When I sent you that history of the appeal fee, I made a point in one of the entries that, and I think it was Resolution 0401, but I don't have it in front of me, that the staff made an estimate of how much it cost them to process an appeal. And it just happened to match almost precisely the figure that they had anyway from past appeals with CPI added to it. So you can always, calculate a cost to make it look like it's costing what you want to say it costs. And for that reason, I really ask you folks to don't rely on representations, get the raw data yourselves, get the timesheet entries yourselves, calculate all of this yourselves. We have some hope in Oregon City at the moment. Who knows how long it will last, but at the moment, we have a city commission who for the most part are very independent thinkers. And I ask you all to, use those sharp thinking minds on this matter in particular. And I would like, since Ms. Turway made a representation on what the elements or how staff arrived at the base fee in what they're proposing to you. And I think you'll find that the base fee that she says is calculated by staff time it follows, my progression in that spreadsheet I gave you. They're almost the same numbers. So that's pretty coincidental, or maybe not. But I would ask that those again, the precise time entries, if it really was a calculation, be entered into the record of these proceedings, or at least made public on the website, so we can comment on them and ask questions about them, and you can ask questions about them. The second request I made is, and I made this in one of my written comments, I hope that all of the information I've given you more than substantiates the need to just do away with that actual attorney fee element of the PC appeal fee and the HRB appeal fee. There's just too many problems with it. There were too many problems with the way it was adopted, not once but twice. And I just think it's unfair. Drop that and then run the base fee by a true process, which includes Goal 1 process. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Egger.
Thank you, Mayor. Paul Edgar, Kenema resident, Oregon City. I think citizen involvement is a critical issue. It's just kind of like the purificational process. And when fees get really high, we restrict citizens' ability to be able to virtually think or comment or just be effective. It's repressive. I alluded to the comparison of a poll tax, where in the South they used fees to try to suppress voting. But has somebody that's got a historic house and went through the complete remodel process and been through it, and I sit on the Clackamas County Historic Review Board for the county, one of the issues that I find out is that it's tough sell to try to protect our historic inventory. People just say, wow, you mean you got to do this? You got to go through the Historical Review Board. But those of us that care know that we've been given this responsibility to protect an asset of the city. And in fact, a national asset, because it's a nationally registered historic district. Kenema is, with historic places status. That means everything. And so there's issues that come along, and I see them, and those of us that care. Well, what do? Do we sit back when we see something? I remember I got cross with somebody after they did a remodel and they put a metal roof on their building, and we know that it was against the code. So what do? Do we pursue it? How does it happen? But it's out there, and it happens all the time. So we have all of these issues that come along. So do you want to take and limit the citizens' ability to appeal something that needs to be appealed? And if you do, then put a great big fee upon it. But if you really care about our city and our historic inventories and what we're trying to accomplish, then let's make it reasonable. Let's make it something. I looked down at what Denise had put down in her memo, and it was like $250. Yeah, it's a small increase from over what it is now. It's $50. But it's something that we should be looking at on trying to make something reasonable. We don't charge everybody for every trip on light rail when light rail trips might cost $30 to $50 a person to do it. We subsidize it. And in fact, this is something that's very, very important if you endorse the need for credibility in historic preservation. Thank you.
Keith? Anybody else? No. Then I will close the public hearing and we will debate. Who wants to go first?
I wanted to ask Laura those two questions.
Go ahead.
In the course of gathering that information from the other jurisdictions, those 11, I didn't see it in this packet. I think it goes all the way back to the work. So what was the range of values that jurisdictions were charging? Just high to low or low to high? And the second part of that question, to give you forewarning, in those conversations, regardless of what those fees are, did they tell you what they felt their actual costs incurred were? For example, they may charge $500 and they're absorbing $3,000.
Yeah, So first question first about the highest and the low. In the list that it was identified, the appeal was $150 in Tualatin, which is the lowest for regular planning commission type appeals. The counties are $250, but there's a state law that requires that. The highest, I would say, probably varies. We have a couple other jurisdictions that also charge city attorney fees. And so depending on what those are, that's where that range comes in. Yeah, actually, that's probably the highest there is base fees plus city attorney fees as well.
And what's that number?
Happy Valley is $1,000 plus attorney fees. They identified that they do a deposit on estimated attorney's fees and that they are interested in recovering all actual costs from appeals through the attorney fee portion as well. So there's a range. You'll see some flat rates at $3,600, $2,100. Depends. And Salem has, so most city, a second question was about how often appeals happen and if they recover those costs. Most cities don't have a whole lot of appeals. So the most common response is like, wow, let me remember back when we had an appeal and see how long that took or what the details were that. Salem by far had the most appeals. They have a very low appeal cost. They said that they keep it low, but they have a little bit more in initial application fees, which doesn't really sound right, but that's what was conveyed to me. So everyone is all over the place. You can be whatever you like. You cannot change fees or change fees, but you can't charge more than how much they actually cost us.
Yeah, the second part of the question was actually, despite whatever the municipalities may charge, what kind of costs are they incurring?
I didn't get a
They
clear
didn't get that,
vision. I
okay.
got a lot of statements from a lot of jurisdictions that we don't recover all our costs. It's clear that most jurisdictions, if not all, don't recover all their costs.
Which one of those, any chance had that it was Happy Valley, said that they deliberately raised their cost in order to?
Wilsonville identified that they have a flat rate of like 3,500-ish or something, but they recently went through this, and through that process, they identified a flat rate that they thought it was a little bit higher to discourage appeals and encourage people to participate earlier on in the process.
Further questions, comments?
I don't have any questions.
Is there going to be a discussion by any?
Yeah, I'm waiting for it to happen.
Well, I tend to side on the placement of fees that are reasonable. I don't want us to be seen as trying to discourage public participation. I'm not saying that appeals encourage public participation, but I think we need to do everything we can to keep fees at a reasonable rate, and if that requires some subsidy. I believe that one of the conversations I've had was the fact that when the Community Development Department, under former Community Development Director John Block, came up with the brilliant idea that those three departments within community development needed to not rely so much on the general fund. And that's when some of the fees started coming in, things that we had never charged for before, we're now going to be charged. I think having a department like community development be completely self-sufficient is not really reasonable, nor can be expected, because a lot of what they do involves public service. And that public service involves answering a lot of questions. It means spending a lot of time with people, and yes, I understand that all costs money, but I think some of that is, as some of the speakers have already stated, they feel, I'm not saying I feel, they're saying they feel that it is part of what they pay in their assessments to the local jurisdictions. I think that fees, you know, as you saw, I submitted some information to Laura, just say, here's some thoughts that I had.
Some of the fees, I will be honest with you, I want to provide a disincentive. And one of them is, it's not for the discussion this time, but one of them is cutting down trees. I think we had a speaker allude to that. I don't want to give people the ability to say, oh, I can pay $300, then I can chop down my tree. If we're a tree city, we need to make it, discourage it. I also want to add some we add some additional fees because I think some of the fees were, well, we could charge a little more. It's a service. So that's kind of where I stand. I don't support, unfortunately, the fees that were currently submitted on the list for 10,000 and 6,000. I think that I can't support that. I do support, however, that the attorneys' actual cost for attorneys, I think that should be excluded on those appeal fees. But I think we need to come to something that's much more reasonable. I'm not sure the $3,763 is still reasonable, but it's definitely less than the 10,000. So I'd start from there.
So Commissioner McGriff, in the Historic Review Board appeal fee,
Yes.
this was one that you specifically said you thought should be raised from $50. Can you very briefly state why you think that is and what you think that number should go to?
Yes, I submitted a suggestion of $250. And I think the reason that I'm suggesting that we up the appeal fee, as I stated previously, that I have not seen another quasi-judicial body like the Historic Review Board work to the degree that they do with the public. There is design advice. Sometimes people come back many times. I think that is appropriate given that we do have 2 historic districts in Oregon City, and I think we need to do everything we can to assist an applicant to get it right. And I say that very emphatically, get it right, so that it works with the districts. But I think in terms of all the work that Historic Review Board puts in and the staff puts in, that to have an appeal fee of $50 to me is a little bit of a slap to the work that they do. And granted, I don't have any logic about how I came up with $250, but I thought that was a reasonable number. And that's why I recommended that we up that. I think, again, because of the work that they do and how they help people, I mean, really, really help people, that they get down to and they still don't agree. And that's the Historic Review Board's job, is that they try to get consensus and agreement with whoever they're working with. And then if they still don't agree, well, then I'm sorry, you need to pay an appeal fee if you disagree with that after all the work they put in for people.
Thank you for that. I guess I would like to throw that at, I think that's great. I actually think $250 is reasonable for Historic Review Board, and I'm willing to support $250. I don't really want to go higher than that.
I don't either, but that was just my idea. Thank you for asking.
I want to make sure I understood you. Did you say attorney fees should be excluded? Excluded.
From the, yes,
Okay, I want to make sure that you
Yes.
said that.
because I don't know what that number is. That's sort of it's kind of out there.
Right. Yeah, so I was trying to take them one at a time. So Historic
Yes,
Review Board,
yes.
I would agree with that proposal. We're not talking about any attorney fees. We're talking
No.
about just a flat fee of $250.
Yep.
Hold on, so if we're talking about an appeal, because the appeal can come from 2 directions.
Yes, it could.
So I would consider that reasonable if it's the applicant who is appealing
Sure.
the denial or whatever. But I think for just average Joe in the street, I think that's where we come into this problem of somebody just being obstructionist all the time.
Yeah.
So I would consider the $250 fee for the applicant to appeal. And then I think we need to have a different fee for someone who is not the applicant to appeal the decision.
And what range would that fee fall within?
I don't know, $500, $1,000, I don't know.
Can
But
we consult with Ms. Richter?
Yeah.
Can
I
we
don't
do?
know
We
if
have
that
a
works.
2-tiered fee
Can't
based on who the
discriminate.
I don't think person is.
I think if you can identify a policy basis for that different approach, I don't think it's legally
Well, here's the policy.
problematic.
Here's the policy basis. The policy basis is the applicant has spent a bunch of money to get to that spot. And the people that are appealing a positive decision from the Historic Review Board have got no money and have got no skin in the game.
So the current process though, so let's run this through the system. If the current process, if someone were to go before the Historic Review Board, it is a public hearing and others in the community could show up and provide public comment. And in order for it to, when it comes to appeal, in order for it to be heard, they would have had to have made public comment during that process, correct?
Correct. Process. I would
And
say
raise
that
the
someone.
issue.
And raise the issue, that
Yes,
has
and
to be
raise
the
the issues
specific
with-
One at a
issue.
time.
Specific specificity.
Yes.
Sufficient.
Sufficient specificity, yes. I would say that someone who participates in the process and comes in and does not agree with either quasi-judicial body should have the right to appeal, and the fee should not be different. I would have to say, speaking for myself, since I live in a historic district, if there was some decision that was made that I disagreed with and I participated in the process, I feel that I should have the right to appeal it because I do have skin in the game. What happens in my historic district definitely has a factor on how it affects the other historic resources within that particular district. And there is a financial and psychological and heartfelt investment that's already been made by me and other people into their homes. So that is, I mean, it's very personal for me. And I would feel, I mean, for me, it would have to be pretty extreme that I would appeal it, but I'm just using myself as an example since I live in a historic district. I would want that opportunity to say, gee, thanks, but I do disagree with this for these reasons.
So before I comment, I'd like to ask, what's the frequency of HRB appeals as opposed to the others?
There was 7 within the same time range.
Time range
Of
being
10 years.
That's not very many.
Okay, and I'll give you what I think. I think the 250 is fine with me, and I do it because of the lack of frequency. And as a caveat to that, I know the city has just implemented a new timekeeping system. Let's start with 250. In 2 years, we come back and revisit it. And if it's all fine, 250 it is. If it's out of control, we revisit the subject and we amend it at that point. That's my thoughts on it.
Commissioner Smith?
I have no problem with that. I guess the only thing that current concerns me about this topic tonight is that we're just randomly picking numbers, which is what I kind of didn't want to do the last meeting we had, and which is why, you know, one would hope we would have had some options to look at, but so I don't know how. Well, that's right. So I don't know how I agree with the attorney comments, and I agree with the 250, but I don't know how we get to a place with the other issue.
Okay,
planning.
so sounds like we have a consensus on 250 for the Historic Review Board fee, and we're going to subsidize the rest? Nodding heads?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So now we're on to the Planning Commission appeal. Any thoughts on that?
So keeping in that vein, I guess I would comment, there is a current appeal fee that's administrative, that's $250. And I'm on that chart, and truthfully, I'm considering just taking that $250 and going down the line. Say a Historic Review Board is $250 and Planning Commission decisions $250.
I'll respond.
So if you're wondering where I get the number from, that's where I'm getting it from.
Okay. Commissioner Long?
I'll respond to Commissioner Smith and say, yes, we are tasked with picking a number. And we are because the quality of information we have does not give us any other option. It's not like we have supporting data that puts us in a comfortable place. So I would comment that I thought Mr. Nacita's submittals were very telling. I spent a lot of time reading them, and I spent a lot of time with dictionaries. You know, I looked at, because every word means something.
Yes, it
Every
does.
word means something. So overhead is a cost or expense that's incurred in the general upkeep and running of a plant, premise, or business, and is not attributable to a specific product or item. Don't forget that we are a service organization. Our product is service. This is a specific product within that service level. Defray, because it talks about the word defray. And that definition, especially of an organization, is either to pay the cost of something or to pay or provide all or part of the money for costs or expenses. I took statistics, and I think Mayor Neely is a statistician, so he would enjoy this. There's the average, there's the mean, which is the one that falls in the middle. There's the mode, which is the value that occurs most frequently. And I'm not here to give you a statistics lesson, but I'll do this in plain language. The smaller the sample size, the less confidence you can have in the result. And if you have a sample size of 4, you could be off by 50% easily. And that's a statistics lesson. And the simple example of that is a statement that I read that said averages can be misleading when that sample size is heavily skewed at one end with a small number of unrepresented outliers or pulling the average in a direction. For example, there's an average in the city that the income was $7,900, was $46,000. But if just 2 people, Warren Buffington and Oprah Winfrey, relocated there, that average would end up being $75,000 in a household. So you got to watch those numbers. So I think what I say is that the set of numbers has to be broadly representative of the types of appeals and the costs that we're likely to experience. I know Mr. Nacita quoted, and rather than 3 or 4 or 3 occurrences, he had some 0 value occurrences in there. And if we had figured them in, we'd be up to like 6 or 7 or 8 occurrences. We'd have to divide by that number, which would drive it down. So all that being said, and being one that believes that sometimes you just absorb costs as a cost of doing business and being a service organization, and we're a service industry, we serve the public, these are infrequent events. We also have this timekeeping system, which I think we need to insist that when we start processing these, I'm quite comfortable, and I'll go with 250, and in 2 years I'll review it, and if we're wrong, and we'll amend it then. But I want to encourage participation, and that comes with a sense of responsibility to the community too. I don't want frivolous entries. That's my statement.
Mr. Smith? Commissioner McGriff?
He's thinking.
Still thinking, but
Go ahead.
no, you're fine, go.
No, you have dibs.
I mean, I see you being consistent, but that's a huge drop from where we're at, so I'm still debating that.
I guess my comment is that truthfully, I feel like the flat fee of $34.63 or whatever to $3,400 is unreasonable for the average
Right.
person. If I had an issue, for me to take a 50-50 bet to see if the city commission is going to agree or disagree, I've just laid down $3,700, and that's a lot of money.
But on the other hand, you would want people, if they're appealing a planning commission decision, to have some basis in fact. And so have to pay a fee so that, if the fee's only $250, anytime any developer tries to do anything in Oregon City, there's going to be somebody that's going to appeal it because it's so cheap, and it drives development costs way up, and it possibly makes us look like we're not a welcoming city for new businesses and other kinds of things.
So those are all hypothetical. We've only had 3 appeals.
Historically, yeah.
Over 10 years.
Because the number has been at that $3,000 level.
So what number would you propose?
I'm happy sticking where it's at, but that's about as far down as I'd be willing to go right now. This one is even more important to me than the Historic Review Board as far as having skin in the game. Because the fact is that the Abernathy Place Hotel project, they've got a couple $1 million invested already. So some neighborhood person with $250 can come and delay for 2 or 3 years a project just because they don't like something about it.
Is there a methodology to do a tiered system, depending on like the value of the project or something? One case that I read, it appeared that it provided for a tiered system.
Right, the tiered system proposals that I've seen are, they're less than the actual or average because they say 5% of the application fee or $5,000, whichever is less. So in our circumstance, let's say we did some percentage of an application fee or less than $10,477, whichever is less. And then they would pay some percentage less of $10,477.
Well, at least that's there's a process there at least, versus us just picking a number out of the sky.
Well, and I do want to keep in mind, the goal is to encourage meaningful citizen participation, and I know.
That includes appeals. The way I came up with the numbers I came up with was I looked at the chart that was supplied. I looked across the board at all the jurisdictions, and I said, okay, the ones that are comparable to us, and that's where I came up with the numbers that I came up with, which was $1,000 and or $1,500 based on what I saw here. And that was before we got the new information. But I cannot in good conscience recommend $10,477.
I don't think that any of us are.
No, I don't think we are comfortable. I'm still very uncomfortable with the current fee of $3,763. And we also got into some discussion a few months ago, about the conditional use fee, and that's at $4,091. I can't support that one either. I don't think that's reasonable.
We're restricting our conversation, Commissioner McGriff,
Yes,
to
I
the
understand.
one we're talking about
So
here.
I'm suggesting $1,500.
Okay, that was my question, based on your
I can
research.
support that.
I can too, because I did some calculations while we were talking earlier, and, so if we were charging, I know you said $85 an hour, so if we were doing $75 an hour, which is still a reasonable cost, hourly rate, 20 hours, so we would be subsidizing roughly 20 hours of work. 20 hours would be $1,500. No attorney fees.
Further discussion?
I have one more thing to add, sorry about
Yes.
that. The testimony identifying that we missed the calculation for Historic Review Board, new construction right now. What we're proposing to adopt is this clean version as amended with your comments. Right now, it says $50, and the cell that said plus 2.5% of construction costs was missing. So I would propose adding under Historic Review, new construction, plus 2.5% of construction costs. So the line will read, if approved, $50 plus 2.5 of construction costs, max 1,000.
And that is for appeal of.
No, that's for
It's just the
Oh,
regular,
okay.
and that's
All
the
right.
same fee that it's been, it's no
Become
change
confused
to that fee,
All right.
that calculation was removed.
I'll make a
Thank you for
final.
that.
I don't have any problem with that.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
So final comment is, I feel once again that we're a service organization. We're paying salaries to provide these services already. We're not a profit organization. I don't even know that we're a break-even organization. That's the nature of service. So I would like to keep it toward the low end, but we'll see how the vote goes.
Well, just in response to that, I think that from a fiscal standpoint, that because planning is kind of expands and contracts with the economy, that was the reason we were trying to recover as much of those costs to pay for those planners as we can through the people that are actually using the service. So somewhat like paying your water bill. And so while I agree that, I think $250 for the Historic Review Board's fine, I don't have any problem with that. But I do think we need to recoup at least some of the costs of a planning commission appeal, especially given the fact that the applicants typically are bringing in, let's just say, it's a $2 million facility that's going to employ 10 or 15 people. That's a huge bonus for our economy, and I don't think we want to. People have plenty of opportunity to testify, to write letters, to do all the things, to call every one of us. We have an extensive public participation process. So if people want to testify and they want to say how they feel, they have plenty of opportunity to do that. I think I'm at $1,500 on the planning commission appeal. And are we looking at anything else on this schedule other than those two?
I want to look at conditional use permit and historic review demolition, I also submitted some comments about master plan and non-conforming use.
Well, here's what I think. I think we adopt this schedule tonight with the two changes that we've made, and then give staff an opportunity to, develop some more information on the items that you talked about, and we can talk about it in a work session later.
Okay. If I may, please.
Go ahead.
Why don't you just add one thing? I have long advocated for responsible development in our community. And I think that as a community, we have the right to say what type of development that we want here. We should not be at the mercy of someone who comes in just because they have a $5 million project. Maybe that's not the right $5 million project for our community. If it's not the right $5 million project, then the public or whoever else is out there should have the right to appeal it. It doesn't mean that that's right for us. Lots of people come in and tell you they're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then they don't perform. So I think we have the right. We're Oregon City. We can say what we want here. And I think our community has indicated that many times about what type of development they want to see here. And that's good. But it doesn't mean that just because they come in with a project that that's what we want.
And that was the point I was trying to make. The point I was trying to make is that if you set an appeal fee for a planning commission at $50, then every single project is going to get appealed by somebody. That people should have to be energized enough about whatever the problem is with that appeal to have some skin in the game.
I agree.
And I would comment that not all appellants are going to be our citizenry, and some are going to be corporations.
Exactly.
However, I would still go with a lower number, even if I have to move to 750 or something. And I'm willing to subsidize it for a 2-year period, keep the data, and tell me at the end of 2 years if I need to adjust it or not. And that's what that timekeeping system is designed to do.
So are we at a consensus on the 1,500 for planning commission?
Yeah.
I'm not, but
Rachel?
Kind of neutral at the moment.
Well, we got to get off neutral here, because,
So I would be happy to make a motion if
Go
you'd
ahead.
like one.
yes,
I would like to move that we amend the 2019 planning fee schedule as we stated for $250 for Historic Review Board appeal and $1,500 for Planning Commission decision appeal, and that the other items that we previously were listed, that we come back and talk about those and get some more information from staff and some more discussion amongst the commission for a work session.
Can I add one more thing, which is add the 2.5 plus
Oh, yes, the
2.5% of construction costs?
Yes, the 2.5% for historic review new construction.
and adopting the 2019 planning fee schedule.
Right, and
Okay.
adopting the fee schedule.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Call roll.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
no.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
No.
and Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on.
Do we have any idea of when we might have that come back?
I'd like to pair it with the discussion. We're going to talk about shelters. The commission has talked about adopting a zero fee for the conditional use for certain types of shelters. So after that, it would be a good time that we can wrap those together.
Okay. All right, so moving on to Resolution 19-27, adopting changes to historic review board policies. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. I have Kelly Reed, our planner, to tell you a little bit more.
Thank you. My name is Kelly Reed. I'm your preservation planner. You have a resolution on your agenda for adopting changes to the HRB policies. And since last time we talked about this topic, which was a work session on June 11th, actually, we received your comments at that work session. Thank you for those. We made some changes, revisions to the policies to make them more clear and objective based on your comments. The Historic Review Board then reviewed the final version of the HRB policy changes on July 23rd, and they voted unanimously to approve those and to recommend that the City Commission adopt them by resolution. We have also been working on user-friendly property owner guides that are ready to post to our website once the policies are approved. So just a very quick reminder what the HRB policies are. They were first established in 1986 to give staff the ability to approve alterations to historic resources. They are meant to provide clear direction to property owners who want to gain approval for historically appropriate alterations without having to go before the Historic Review Board. We're updating the policies to remove gray areas in the policies, make them clear and objective, and to add clarifications such as what do we mean by a certain type of fence that we're describing, to address modern products like things like Trex decking or fiberglass windows, materials that people commonly ask us about, and then also to adopt new policies to address solar technology and decks and porches, which were missing from the current policies. So we did a whole lot of community engagement as part of this process. We started last fall. We held work sessions, we visited neighbors associations and the CIC. We direct mailed postcards with information to every historic property in Oregon City. We held an open house online survey and made announcements in the Trail News, social media, and on the city website. And you see a picture there of our open house and some of the public comments that we received on the posters there. And so the staff recommendation is to approve Resolution 1927 to adopt the HRB policy changes. And I'm just showing an example of one of those property owner guides that we've developed.
Okay, questions?
I'm gonna hold till after public testimony.
Okay. And this is a public hearing too, isn't it? So I'll open the public hearing. Mr. Edgar?
Thank you again, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Paul Edgar. I'm from Oregon City and live in a historic house that's been restored. One of the critical things in historic preservation is that you don't make an add-on. Let's say you've got a historic building, a Barclay House, and don't make an incompatible add-on to an immediate building because that detracts. It's incompatible. Well, some of the materials in all of Kenema is a National Register district and has National Register historic status. So when we do infill in a National Register district and we take and allow right next to another house that's historic, a contributing structure, and we call them that in Kenema, a siding. So I'm going to use hardy plank siding because it's available, but it does not have a profile that looks like any of the existing siding. Now, or I allow windows that come in that don't have any compatibility to any existing window design. And a lot of this is in profile, so historic windows are kind of historically tall and narrow. Well, how do we draw lines? And so some of the issues that I've seen up here in the staff report and what's gone through the HRB is opening some of the Pandora's door box. And they're allowing us to bypass compatibility to existing structures and contributing structures nearby by design, by mass. We even have a house now in Kenema with a elevator in it.
Excuse, what did you just say?
We have a house in Kenema with an elevator in it.
Oh.
And what is this is what it's, we've lost track of some of the comparisons. So sometimes when we allow too much subjectivity, people can interpret it, and before you know, Kenema dies the death of 1,000 cuts, and it's no longer relevant. It's no longer needed to be as a National Register district, and we all lost. We lost the battle, we lost the war. So I am concerned. Personally, I would like to see it to be referred back to look at how we can make sure that the profiles do not detract, and that we do not allow buildings that are coming in that destroy the character that makes Kenema what Kenema is, why it's National Register.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we have anybody else?
Yes.
Oh,
Excuse me. Are you going to comment on this?
just come on up, Ms. Laws.
Fill that in later. Thank you.
My name's Carla Laws. I live on Roosevelt. I don't have a historic registered home. I've lived in 3 old homes my own life. 1929, I lived in a house in 1915, and I currently live in a house in 1916. We represented some of this as a CIC representative. The issues that I have with some of these issues is functionality on a home. If you put new windows on an old home, you could be creating mold. And someone young my age at 41 or younger doesn't know these things. Like I get salesmen all the time about windows. And you can actually invite problems by just putting new windows on an old home because old homes need to be breathable. I know that owning 3 different homes. The other thing is when you talk about solar panels, you have people selling solar panels. That's great. I'm totally for solar panels, but on an old home, a lot of times, like my old home from 1915, barely had support for 1 layer of roof. So when you consider these type of changes on these old homes and you want to preserve them, sometimes you get salespeople sell to the people and they don't really know what they're buying or what they're inviting in terms of problems. So my only argument is, in considering all these changes, is to, some home buyers don't know what they're buying into. And if we want to actually preserve these old homes, is to consider that some of these changes might not be good for every single home. So, and especially a registered home that is historic, I want these to stay as much as possible in Oregon City. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? And I'll close the public hearing. I have a question before we get started. How much time did you and the Historic Review Board spend going over these changes, updates?
I don't know exactly how much time, but we held several work sessions over the last 10 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Commissioner McGriff?
Does anybody else want to go before I do?
No.
I don't have a lot of stuff, just couple of things are clarifications. I mean, I'm just saying. Obviously, I live, breathe, eat, and sleep this stuff. Kelly, I don't understand what the statement on, let's see, it's involving fences or walls that are listed in the acceptable category. And there's a paragraph that says fences or walls that are not listed or that are specifically listed under the not acceptable category must be, obviously it should say shall be, for review and decision by the HRB. Then you say fences or walls that are made of not allowed material may be utilized if fully obscured. Pressure treated wood may only be used for fence post and not for any other portion of the fence. What does that mean? Because it's two things they're contradicting to me.
So
If it's not acceptable, it's not acceptable. So then why would we say, if it's not acceptable, why would we say, oh, you can do it if you get it reviewed? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Or if it's obscured.
How about if we let staff answer the question?
Yes.
So if a property owner wants to put up a fence that is in the not acceptable category, they need to ask the board for permission to do that. So that's what that first sentence means. And then the second one adds that if somebody wants to use a material that's not allowed, such as gabion walls are not allowed in the front yard, they can use them if those materials are fully obscured. So, for example, you can cover a gabion wall with basalt, and it's not visible at all. So the structural part of the retaining wall, the gabion part, it is there, but you can't see it at all because it's covered with basalt stone. So that's actually been done in Kenema, or will be done in an upcoming project. And that's been approved. And so we wanted to add that clarification for folks that are in that situation where they need something that's more structural, but then they can cover it up with something else.
It covers up the fencing, I mean, the
cage
wire
part.
cage part and all of
Yeah.
that. I would definitely like to see that. I'm still not super convinced by that. Here's where I'm coming from. If it's not acceptable, then it's not acceptable. I think that the rare exceptions, like somebody using it for something structural like that because you've got a hillside or something like that, is totally appropriate. But if you're going to go through the trouble of putting up a fence that's not acceptable and then you're going to obscure it, to me that just seems like you're throwing bad money after bad money. And why not just put up a fence that is acceptable? I don't think we should allow an out for that. And again, you know that McLaughlin made a request that fencing in our district be applied across the board to everyone, because you go through our neighborhood and you got a rusty old chain link fence here, you got this weird looking chicken wire fence here, and you got this fence here. It just doesn't fit very well with the idea that we have a conservation district or a historic district. So everybody should be able to play by the same rules. And I think that was evident by some recent hearing that I happened to sit in on. I feel very strongly, as you know I do, because I talk to you often, that these policies need to be pretty ironclad in terms of, it's either, people want to know whether I can do it or I can't do it. And I understand that there are exceptions. I do believe in exceptions, but what I get concerned about is that the board, past, present, boards have gone through this extensively and looked at these things. And I look at the stuff you have in the unacceptable category, and I don't want to see any of that in my neighborhood because it's not acceptable. So how would you obscure a concrete block wall? How would you obscure the horizontal board, the stockade fence?
I think the key there is that the block wall, the cinder block wall, can be covered with either brick or stone, a veneer of that allows you to have the structural capability.
That's inception. That's the exception. I totally get that.
Right.
I understand that
And that's what the paragraph says.
But then there's all the other ones that don't seem to me to be exceptions.
Well, if you can't cover a stockade fence with any other material to make it okay, then you can't do it.
Yeah. So then my next question is about the HRB policy number 9. I don't know if we've ever approved any aluminum screen doors. So you're saying, the board is saying, not you personally, the board is saying it's okay to have an aluminum or a metal screen door if they are pre-finished or painted a color that matches the trim or the door. That's on policy number 9.
I don't believe that we made a change to that part of the policy. We did add a clarification to make it more clear and objective, but that's been the policy, my understanding, for many years.
Yeah, and that's why I'm asking for clarification, because it was not my understanding that it was. Then my last question is, again, as you know, my commitment to this. How are we going to try to get this out to people? Because one of the things that we have happen a lot in Oregon City, and I'm sorry to say, we have our weekend warriors. And things happen over the weekend because, let's just say, for example, people know that nobody from the city is out looking at anything. And then how do we get this information across to people? Because as you know, and particularly in McLaughlin, we've had a lot of turnover. Mm-hmm. And if they didn't get the notice before that they're a designated building or they're not a designated building, some of these things apply to people who don't have designated properties and some of them do. Mm-hmm. So how are we going to, and I say we collectively because I think it's everybody's responsibility in my district, how are we going to get this word out to people that you still need to check in? These are policies, but you still need to check in to make sure that you are following something that's appropriate for your house, your fence, your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts about that?
That is a challenge. That's a great question. So we do see a lot of people that don't know about the policies and they do some work and it doesn't meet the policies, unfortunately, and we have to deal with that. We have developed the brochures and policy guides right now. All we do is post the policies on our website. Now that we're updating them, we've created property owner guides, user-friendly, very informative with lots of pictures, that we will have available on our website and in our office. And what we've been doing recently is we get tax assessor data quarterly that shows when when property changes hands. So I get a list every quarter from our GIS department that says, these 10 historic properties have sold, and here's a new owner's address, or the new owner's information. And we send them a welcome packet. It says, you own a historic property, congratulations, thank you, you're helping to preserve Oregon City, here's some information you need to know. And so we would put the updated policies into that packet that we send them. That is, that's probably one of the more effective things I think that we can do.
It seems like very proactive.
It is, but it doesn't count the people that have historic review policies apply to them, but they aren't getting that letter. So I think that's going to be responsibility of somehow or another, our neighborhood associations are gonna need to help get the word out and neighbors talking to neighbors, I think. My only last thing here is, again, I still don't think it, and this is aesthetic for me. If you're gonna put up a fence, you should not be able to use divoted lumber, and I'm hoping that that's still out of the policy. So you can put pressure treated, but not the one with the little divots in it, because you got a beautiful picket fence and you got a post with divots, which is not historically accurate.
I think we just say pressure treated wood. We don't get into detail about what type of pressure treated wood it is.
Well, we had that in there previously. You couldn't use divoted lumber for a post, because again, it does take a lot. It's a lot of wear and tear if you cover it, because it doesn't last. So even if you clad it and it's out in the elements, it won't last. And I don't know many people are gonna sit and putty the divots. So I would recommend that as a change, that you put in that divoted lumber for the posts for fences should not be allowed. Because they do make pressure treated without the divots.
Right, so right now, what the policy says, pressure treated wood may only be used for fence posts and not for any other portions of the fence. I'm not sure what, I would want to probably add more detail on what we mean by divoted lumber.
Okay, that's appropriate.
And then I also don't know what's
It's called
readily
incised
available.
lumber. It's actually, the term is incised.
Right.
You, the commission, can suggest an edit to add language that says no incised lumber.
So incised or pressure treated wood may only be used for.
No, they can use pressure treated because they make pressure
No.
treated
I
fence
see.
posts without the
Pressure-treated.
incisions in it.
Excluding incised.
Got it.
Is that, would I make it more confusing?
So we would add a sentence or we would add a section where it says pressure treated wood can only be used for the post. We would say except incised is not allowed.
Yes. If you say except, with the exception of incised
Written
lumber.
much better than
Yes,
how I said
that keeps it very simple, doesn't make a lot of addition.
Anybody else?
I did want to circle back. You had a question about applying fences to non-designated properties
Yes.
in McLaughlin. If Carrie could respond to that.
What was the question?
Can you apply the policies to undesignated properties in McLaughlin Conservation District? Doesn't meet our definition of new construction.
Carrie, it wasn't a question. It was 2 years ago, the McLaughlin neighborhood sent a request to the Historic Review Board to consider adding all the structures within McLaughlin, have only the fence policy apply, so that it would be consistent across the board, the same way it is in Kenema. Every structure in Kenema, the fence policy applies. In McLaughlin, it does not. And that was the request. I'm not asking it as a question, I'm just saying that was a request that had been made to the Historic Review Board.
I believe that the code applies to new construction within historic districts. And so that's what it applies to, and these policies provide exceptions to those new construction obligations, right? These policies there are things that are so de minimis that we don't want to go through review. So if you fall within this category of fence, you don't have to come get a certificate of appropriateness because that's the fence you're building. So these are exceptions from the requirement to get a certificate of appropriateness. And that's what, I mean, I think that explains why if you want to do a gabion fence that doesn't have the right buffering, you come and you ask for a certificate of appropriateness because your circumstances call for a gabion fence because of your exceptional circumstances. And that is the method for you to get that. But you don't fall within these administrative minor activities. And these are supposed to be sort of an incentive for people to, to comply, right? But
Just to clarify one more thing, as far as if these policies would apply to undesignated structures in conservation districts, they would not, because the undesignated structures in conservation districts only receive historic review board review if they meet our definition of new construction, of which this type of work falls below. So new construction is a new structure or an addition of 30% or more of the original square footage of a structure. So thus, you would see a fence that doesn't meet HRB policies next to a house that is required to meet HRB policies in the conservation area, or in the conservation district, because it's made up of individually designated structures among a whole group.
It was just a request that the neighborhood had made.
I just wanted-
And I said that it got sent to HRB, they didn't get a response, and I said I would put it out there on their behalf. So I did that. Not saying I
Clarifying for the
agree or
record.
disagree, they're just saying for consistency purposes, they would have liked to see fence policy apply to everybody.
Okay,
Go ahead.
some questions. So for HRB policy number 3, repair or replacement of siding, can you tell me why are we adding the line, the very first sentence, that it only applies to designated structures or contributing structures in Kenema?
Why it only applies to designated structures and contributing?
Yeah.
We wanted to differentiate between contributing and non-contributing structures in Kenema, so the first sentence applies to designated structures and those that are contributing in Kenema, which are the homes that have been deemed to have historic integrity and contribute to the character of that.
So you're saying,
National Register district, and then for non-contributing structures, on the next page, the last sentence, fiber cement siding is permitted under the following circumstances on non-contributing structures in Kenema. So we're sorry about that. We are separating those to treat them a little bit differently because non-contributing structures, many of which are built in 1940 and after, don't have that historic integrity and aren't contributing to the district. And many of them don't even use wood siding now and have various types of siding.
so then why are we adding it just to this policy and not HRB policy number 1 or policy number 2? I mean, what is special about 3 that makes it where we're not applying that same caveat in 1 and 2 and other ones?
Well, some of the, several of the policies, we actually differentiate between contributing and non-contributing structures. Many of these policies, the board didn't want to change and thought that it was appropriate to require the same of all properties, even the non-contributing in Kenema. But I think for siding and for windows and porches and decks, the materials used to make those, they wanted to let the non-contributing structures and then accessory buildings as well have a little bit more latitude in what kind of, improvements they can make and what kind of materials they can use.
I guess it seems contrary to the idea that Kenema is a National Register district and whether or not you're contributing or non-contributing. I mean, even if you're a non-designated and maybe not officially designated as a contributing structure, you're still in that neighborhood that has a historic character. It seems odd to me that we're saying you know, we're differentiating for like this policy here, this policy there.
Yeah, the board, I think, grappled with that a bit as well, and they did, I think, give a lot of credence to the public input that we received that was really, you know, we had some strong opinions in both ways, but the middle of the pack, kind of the largest majority of most of the public input that we got, wanted more flexibility in materials. And so the board was willing to do that, but not for historic designated structures, only for the non-contributing structures.
So how
Anything
do we,
else?
yeah, how do we get them to be, how do we get them to come, to be more contributing?
That's a great question. You know,
I don't.
yeah, and many times you don't, but
There's qualifications up
We-
front, right?
I don't think that the theory is that we want these non-contributing buildings to be more contributing. I think we want them to not detract from the contributing. We try to have the massing uniform, we try to have the materials not conflict. We try to let the wind, you know, be minimalist in the details to highlight the contributing buildings, but I don't think we're trying to make 1950s buildings look like 1880s buildings. I mean, even if you could do it, I mean, I understand you, to people who have the eye for it, it is impossible. But I think the idea is not to make non-contributing buildings look contributing.
No, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. So let's say I've got a non-contributing structure. Currently, it has vinyl siding on it, and I decide I'm gonna take it off. Would we not want to encourage them to not put vinyl siding back on it and put on something that would be more compatible with the district, such as fiber, cement siding, or hardy plank, or something that had a profile that looked more historic as opposed to vinyl?
and that's exactly what this policy does. It's, vinyl siding is never permitted, but it specifically says fiber cement siding is permitted under the following circumstances as a replacement for vinyl siding, and on accessory buildings and non-contributing structures.
So then this policy, what if it's my neighborhood and somebody wants to repair and replace the siding? Where's the state? I think that's what you were maybe getting at, because where does it say McLaughlin Conservation District if you're gonna replace or repair your siding?
So that's the first sentence on designated structures, so that applies to all designated structures in McLaughlin. New siding shall match original siding in both material and style.
And where's that one at?
Sorry, that's the first sentence of HRB policy number 3.
Number 3. Okay.
So if somebody has wood siding, we want them to replace it with wood, and we wouldn't allow fiber cement, unless the board approves that.
Okay.
Okay, so, I think we're getting down deep in the weeds on this, and as with the planning commission, I generally support, you know, the work they did and all that stuff, and we rarely overturn planning commission decision, and I kind of feel like this is the same way. They've had numerous work sessions, numerous meetings to get to this policy point, and for us to be, you know, picking apart, you know, one little item or two, I think, it kind of denigrates the work that they've already done. I don't see anything that jumps out at me that sounds horrible. So, is there a motion?
I will, I just had a question for Carrie. So there's still some places in here that say must. I'm a real shall person, if we want people to do, Tony's smiling because he knows this. So why wouldn't we say shall?
If you would like it to be shall, I'm perfectly happy for it to be shall.
I think shall is a little,
Yes, I agree.
Do you want to go through and identify where you want it to be shall?
well, I think it says, so replacement of wooden gutters, blah, 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 are permitted, shall be painted, and then there was a must in there somewhere. Oh, structure must be re-roofed with either, so it should be shall.
So,
Can't we just
let's-
put
Just,
global?
could you just
Hang on.
change them, just change them.
Let's do
I don't
it.
need to go through every one of them.
Let's do it this way, okay? We're gonna have a first reading on this with the caveat that the musts are gonna be turned to shalls by the time the second reading comes.
We're doing a resolution,
Yes.
A resolution, whatever.
Yeah.
so we wouldn't have a second
Second
reading,
reading.
but we can come.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking for
Yes,
the
a
wrong item.
resolution. Yeah, so I mean, I will move that we approve the proposed changes to the HRB policies with the caveat of changing the must to shall, and then the little explanation about the incised lumber.
So it would be the adoption of resolution number 1927.
Yes, with those caveats.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded for discussion. Call the roll.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
and Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break and we'll come back into the rest of this.
That's what happens when you go to law school. You see the shoulds and the shalls and you get freaked out.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, we will reconvene the meeting. And we are moving on to Municipal Code, Chapter 17.40, Historic Overlay District. Ms. Turway?
Again, Planner Kelly Reed.
Thank you. This is very much related to the last topic. The proposal is a legislative amendment to our code of Chapter 1740. It's a code cleanup item. I just want to give you a very quick background first on the different types of historic review so we're clear on all of it. And I realize this would have been useful at the beginning of last conversation too, so I apologize for that. But so there are two main types of historic review processes. There's alterations to existing historic resources, and then new construction within the historic districts. So alterations to existing resources is defined as any exterior alteration that changes the outside of the structure or the property, including additions that are less than 30% of the original size of the structure. We have a set of design guidelines that we've adopted specifically for alterations, and the code refers to those, and those have been in place for a long time. We are not proposing any changes to those design guidelines. This review for alterations is a type 3 review by the HRB unless the project falls under the HRB policies, which we just discussed, which is a type 1 review. So for new construction, moving to the right side, new construction is defined as any new building in the historic district or an addition to an existing structure that's 30% or more of the original size of the structure. We have a different set of design guidelines for new construction that are also adopted and referred to in Chapter 1740, and we're not proposing any changes to those design guidelines. New construction is always a type 3 review by the Historic Review Board. All right, now that we've gone through that, I'll talk about what changes we are proposing today. And these are changes related to the HRB policies. We just talked about those, so we don't need to go over it again. So we are removing conflicting procedural standards in our chapter that are related to HRB policy review. And those include how the policies are adopted and then the process of administrative review. So the revised code will continue to say that that policies are required to be adopted by the Historic Review Board with public notice and with comment from the Planning Commission and from the City Commission. And we're proposing to remove the list of HRB policy topics in the code and just refer to the policies themselves. And then the list is what the list is, just adopted by resolution by you. And then the process of administrative review, there are two sections in the existing code that talk about HRB policy review process, and they conflict with each other. Because the policies are clear and objective with no discretion required, we want to make it crystal clear in our code that that's a administrative review process. It's a type 1 staff review. So we want to remove the language that's conflicting with that requires public notice and a hearing if a hearing is requested within 10 days of that public notice. So if something's clear and objective and a proposal clearly meets the HRB policies, we don't want to have a hearing for that when we know what the outcome will be. And again, if, as we discussed before, if a property owner wants to go to the HRB because they disagree with staff's decision or they want a different review, they can request to go to the HRB at any time. And so we always look at code amendments for compliance with our comprehensive plan. These amendments are simply procedural. We're not changing review criteria or design standards. They will not impact the status of our historic districts. And they will offer, of course, our streamlined review process and provide more clarity to property owners of what that process is. So the staff recommendation for this code amendment is approval. We presented the proposed amendment to the Historic Review Board and to the CIC for comment. We didn't request any formal recommendations from them. And then also the State Historic Preservation Office reviewed the proposal and commented that it is in keeping with our certified local government status as a local jurisdiction that has a historic preservation program that's in compliance with state law. And the Planning Commission reviewed this on July 22nd. They had a unanimous vote of to recommend that the City Commission approve this amendment.
Questions, discussion? Motion?
I have one question. Can you tell me how often are the Historic Review Board policies updated or changed?
They were last updated, I believe, in the early 2000s, it looks like. Each policy has a little...
The little revised dates?
Yes.
On there.
So some of them haven't been revised since they were originally adopted in '86. And then some of them, it looks like they were updated into the year 2000. But I think we didn't touch them for a long time, just because we didn't have any compelling reason to update them until recently.
Commissioner McGriff?
Just a question. So this most be going to probably be for Carrie. Since we're proposing to take out the specific discussion about the policies, and those policies are adopted by resolution, by continuing to refer to them in 1740, they still have the same force and effect of law?
They do, just like the design guidelines do. The design guidelines are not codified, but they are referenced in 1740 as the controlling criteria, and that is what we use.
Okay. So then my question for you is, Kelly, is that if a person, again, clear and objective to me sometimes gets to be a little subjective, because what's clear and objective to you might not be totally clear and objective to me or someone else. And so if someone disagrees with that clear and objective decision, you're saying that they have 10 days to ask for a hearing?
So that's the provision that we're removing because it conflicts with the other provision that says it's a solely administrative review.
And so if someone disagrees?
If the property owner disagrees with the staff decision, the property owner can make an application to the Historic Review Board, pay the $50 fee and say, Historic Review Board, I want to put this type of fence up. Can you please review it for me and then grant me a certificate of appropriateness? Other folks would not have any ability to do that regarding someone else's proposal.
Okay, and that's what's proposed to be changed?
Right, and that code language outlining the procedure for the 10 days and the requested hearing, I do not know the last time we have utilized that process since I have been working on this, and I think since any of our existing staff, including Christina, our previous preservation planner, I don't think any of us are aware of any time that we've actually utilized that process, even though it was in our code, because we were referring to the other section for what the process was.
So this only is going to apply to which provisions of the code again?
So this amendment only affects work that meets the HRB policies. It wouldn't affect the proposals for alterations that would go to the board or the proposals for new construction that would go to the board.
Is there a motion?
Can I just make one comment?
Oh, I didn't have them back up and pack it up.
Just one.
Can I make one comment?
Sure, go ahead.
So I just kind of want to daylight this because I had an email exchange with Laura about your, the process for the board changing policies in the future. It was interesting to me that, and I believe this was the way it was beforehand, and you just brought the text forward from the deleted piece, but in that section E that is saying that the planning commission and the city commission are offered comment opportunity, but policy changes aren't actually coming to us in the future for approval. And that was a surprise to me because I felt like we were going through an approval process right now for policy changes. And so it was confusing to me. I thought it was conflicting that we were going through reviewing policies and we were going to adopt them and review them, adopt them. But then going forward, that is not going to happen. That is just, we're given a chance to provide comment.
I caused that confusion.
Okay.
So I asked staff to bring this in a resolution to the city commission because there were so many changes that were happening to the policies. The code authorizes Historic Review Board to adopt their own policies. And I think that makes sense in the future if they want to make a small tweak or something like that. You already delegate authority to them to implement the historic review. It's just, there was a lot here. It felt like more process is better. I know there's been concerns about Kenema, and there's just a lot of changes. So I asked Kelly to bring this forward as a resolution. I've not identified that any of these policies have ever been adopted by resolution before.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Smith in this one. I would say that if we word it in such a way that the Historic Review Board can create policies, but those policies must be officially adopted by the City Commission, because we are the final voice.
Yeah, I would prefer for it to be that way. So I was surprised at this language, because I was like, am I missing something? This looks like it's the future.
No, I got that too.
Things are, yeah.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say that, and again, I don't know what happened to a lot of the paperwork, but we did adopt some changes to the Historic Review Board policies in the 90s that we did bring before the City Commission by resolution. That's how we adopted them, so that they would be effective, full, with law and everything. And then they were also in the code, so, and maybe that was the difference, is because those policies were in 1740, which then got forwarded to the City Commission because it was a code change. So now with them only being adopted by resolution and referred to by reference, maybe that's where the change is. But we always brought those policies before the City Commission.
Yeah, we did go back and look through the resolutions and clearly didn't identify.
I know, there's a lot of stuff missing, and I am so sorry for that. There's stuff I'm still getting asked about that, yeah, we did that, we
Okay,
did
come
that,
on,
and I
let's
don't know
move
where
on.
it is.
So is there a motion? Sorry. Mr. Nacita.
Sorry. James Nacita, Oregon City. I have two items. The second one is related to what's being passed around, and so I'll do the first one while it's being passed around. I'm kind of segueing off Commissioner McGriff's comments, and I don't know if I'm misunderstanding it, but on the removal of subsection K there, I'm not sure that subsection K was about giving notice, 10 days notice for HRB policy decisions that are non-discretionary. It seems that subsection K was applying only to a limited range of two items: construction of fences on historic sites, and then exterior alterations, excluding additions to incompatible structures in the Kenema Historic District. So only those have this special policy about the 10-day notice. And I guess construction of fences, that does seem to be rather non-discretionary. But the other one, I just want to make sure the commission is like understanding what this is about, because it seems that, and I don't have the policies on the top of my head, I don't know if the HRB policies as they've been amended, or the design guidelines as they stand, address this situation of some type of review with notice for exterior alterations to incompatible structures in the Kenema district. Because if you delete this section, then you're deleting that review, and do you want that review to happen, even on a limited basis with this 10-day notice? Back when it was adopted, they had a reason for doing so, and it might be worth reviewing why they did that. I kind of like the idea of some kind of review for exterior alterations to non-compatible structures in the Kenema Historic District. And, please give due consideration as to whether you want to remove that review process if it isn't already otherwise addressed in the policies or the design guidelines. The second one, oh dear, I gave away my own copy. The second one I'm passing around was, this came up in a matter in Kenema, oh, thank you, maybe a year ago, and I wanted to alert everybody to a lingering definition in 1704, not in 1740, it's in the whole development code. That bolded language seems to suggest that in 1740, new construction is only where there is already a structure on the lot. And that new construction doesn't include construction on vacant lots. So that would exclude, review for everything in Kenema and McLaughlin that's on a vacant lot. And it really affects a lot of what, is going to apply in 1740. So I put.
You're out of time, sir.
I just wanted to give you an alert to try to make sure that you may want to remove that or amend it. Thank you.
I have a question, if I may.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure Jim, I just want to make sure I'm referring to the right, because you don't have page numbers on here, so.
Yeah.
Is it you're talking about the
The
very
first page
The
is
very first
17,
page?
yeah, 1704-815.
Okay.
That's not part of,
An additional.
that's not part of 1740, which is the Historic Review Overlay District.
Right.
This is one of the definitions in the entire development code.
Okay.
In the entire zoning ordinance, there's a whole, 50, 70, 80 definitions.
Definitions, yes.
And this is the one for new construction, and it's kind of hidden there, but it gives a specific definition for new construction. And the bold, I put in bold the part that I think is dangerous or unclear, because that language, if you read that bold sentence, seems to suggest that new construction in historic districts only includes construction on lots
That already have a structure.
that already have a structure on it.
Right.
In my understanding, it applies, in 1740, it applies to vacant property because that's considered to be new construction, and on existing properties where it meets the requirements of that 30%.
Yes. However, then this should be changed to reflect what's in 1740.
Sir, you're out of time.
Thank you,
Okay.
did answer my question. Help Carrie.
My recollection is that this argument was raised in the Kenema Cottages case.
I don't know anything about that.
And I can brief the commission. We're gonna have to come back anyway if we're gonna address Commissioner Lyle Smith's concern about adopting these by resolution. But this issue was raised, I think, in the Kenema Cottages case that went to LUBA. The argument was made that the new construction standards only applied to construction where there is already a structure, and LUBA rejected that argument. So, I mean, whether or not there needs to be additional clarity for the definition purposes, maybe it does, but I think the ambiguity was resolved by LUBA in the Kenema Cottages case.
Okay.
I can't see how building a building on bare land is anything but new construction.
Can't either.
That's what
I'm
I
sorry.
think, but
Yeah.
this does raise a slight.
So can I have a motion to set this over to date certain of the first meeting in September?
Yes, I would so move that we,
So, but
okay,
Hold on.
go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Carrie.
I just wanted to, if there are other concerns that the commission has, I'd like to hear them so that we can get a code that works for you guys.
I think we're there.
We're there with the caveat about the resolution and adoption by the commission.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there a definition in chapter 1740 that is different than the definition in 1704?
I don't,
About new construction?
All our definitions are in
1704, okay.
Or in
Or
1704.
and I'll look at this issue and be prepared to brief you more completely.
Okay, is there a motion to set this over?
I would so move.
August
Seconded.
21st?
Moved and seconded. What?
August 21st.
Fine.
Yeah. that's
Call
fine.
roll.
Who seconded?
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
And Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Moving on.
We have three folks wanting to speak for 7C, nobody for 7A and B. Would you like to switch the order, or you just want to go through A and B?
I'm fine. Let's go to, we'll take 7C first.
We have,
you do?
Metro and Clackamas County's here for the food waste item.
For what?
Oh, for
The first
7A.
item.
Yeah,
Sorry,
this is daunting.
nobody signed up there.
Well, they're not signed up to speak. I was
Oh,
just
my
sitting
bad.
there in the audience.
They're getting paid. We'll go 7C.
Good man.
Resolution number 19-29, revocable long-term obstruction in the right-of-way at 302 Third Avenue. Mr. Lewis.
Yep.
All right.
Let me switch gears here.
Catch up.
So, thank you, Mayor. So we are on 7C item, we're asking you to approve resolution 19-29, a revocable permanent obstruction in the right-of-way permit for the property of 302, just for short, it's 302 Third Avenue. So the property owner has applied for a renewable permit obstruction in the right-of-way. The obstruction is a fence. It's a fence that has existed for reportedly 32 years.
It's not coming up.
This item has been brought to you both because of the application, but I also believe due to a variety of complaints about the fence. And so the complaints that we've heard is the fence is illegally located in the right-of-way. The fence is blocking the sight distance, resulting in unsafe condition, and the fence does not meet the city's historic district fence codes. So I've highlighted encroachment. Regardless of the other two items, whether it meets or does not meet the sight distance or the fence requirements, this is really about an encroachment. And that's where you have your strongest authority to approve or deny this fence. So I've got 13 slides on the encroachment, most of which are pictures, and 4 slides for the sight distance and another 4 slides for the fence requirements. So I'll try to get through it, but this is an interesting issue. So again, this is a location map of which property we're talking about, and then a picture of 302 Third Avenue, should say, on there. Just generally, there's a variety of municipal codes that are code overlays that affect this property. Natural Resource Overlay Code, which is shown in the picture. Geologic Hazard and Historic Overlay cover pretty much all of Kenema, so I didn't have a graphic or need a graphic for those. Again, with regard to the encroachment, which is where I'm going to start with, the municipal code for this is really 12.0405, and really there's 2 codes in this chapter that kind of apply to this, and generally I would say the code is pretty clear, really, on this. The city commission has all the authority that it needs to have to make a decision whether they want to allow an encroachment in the right of way or not. And that's really up to the city commission. So really, it requires the property owner to go through a process to get approval. And the next slide kind of covers that, which is really the section that talks about what the process is for an obstruction or getting approval of an obstruction in the right of way. Again, it requires you to adopt a resolution to do that. We have been following the code on new encroachments. We brought several of those to you, either in consent agenda form or in scenarios where we've talked about them. So we've Most have been approved, as far as I know. Most of the encroachments that have come before you have been approved. Just know that staff usually review those and talk to the applicant about whether or not we recommend that they pursue it. There's fees associated with applying for those, their application. And so we try to talk through that with them, evaluate that even before the application comes in, so that we're not necessarily spending they're not necessarily spending a lot of time on that if we don't think it would be approved. And if we don't think it would be approved for those, it's been my experience that they listen to staff and they find another way to do it, or they just, I don't know, go away and do something else. So this is a site plan of the property. It's taken from our aerial photographs of OC maps. So the white lines, the yellowish white lines, I guess, the more squared up white lines represent property lines, and they're relatively close. The more white lines represent kind of the edge of the pavement. The red line represents where the fence is around the property. And we're showing about, can't read that number anymore, and I forget what it was, but I think it was like 17 or 18 feet.
It's 18 feet.
In the, of that fence that encroaches, so that's the distance between the property line and where the fence exists now. There's also some blue lines on there that represent the creek, the Coffee Creek, and then the kind of the white shaded area represents the basalt concrete channel. I've got some better pictures of that, so I'll go ahead and show that to you. But one thing that I'll point out is one corner of this property, which is on the top edge of the screen there, is actually their property. The roadway encroaches onto their property at that corner. And I think that's another kind of consideration that we've been thinking about in this situation. More pictures of the fence. So this fence has been here in one form or another for 32 years, according to the applicant. And it definitely, well, you can see it, it's along the driveway there. What you don't see behind in this picture is the basalt channel. And then that guardrail there, I believe, is a city facility. I don't think the neighbor put that in there. I think that was another facility that's longstanding that the city must have put in. I don't know if that was before or after the fence, but it's there now. All I can tell you about the history of the fence that we can tell is we took historic photos. It's hard to tell from our historic aerial photos when the fence was there, but we've done road inventory photos since 2005. The fence existed in 2005, and I believe the property owner that it's been there for 32 years. Again, just other views of the fence, looking towards 3rd Avenue, kind of coming down Ganong Street. I took some pictures from the property side. The property owner gave me permission to come on the back side and just kind of look at this. So we're at his driveway or near his front porch, looking kind of back at the basalt channel. This is the basalt channel that sits behind the fence. So that's kind of the Ganong facing fence and then the guardrail is on the other side of that there. This channel's relatively deep, so just the fence essentially provides some fall protection as well from that channel, and other protections which I've kind of outlined in my report. Let me just make sure I didn't want to say anything else about that. Again, if you've been to this site, it's unique in that the creek runs under the house. And so this is kind of the end of the channel that has always been there, been there for many, I think it was early 1800s when that wall was built, or mid 1800s. I'm not exactly sure of the timing of that, but obviously the house was built over the channel. And this is another picture looking at the house from kind of the fence line, inside that fence line. And my recollection is that channel's about 5 feet deep. And then once it goes under the house, it's pretty unique. I don't know that, I didn't get under there or look too closely under there. I don't know that there's much channel under there. There maybe used to be. The applicant's here, so if we want to ask him more about that, we can. And then that's kind of looking at a close-up of what that channel looks like behind the guardrail. You can kind of see a little piece of it just under the fence there. And then some more pictures. This is the kind of the landscape pictures on your left are just Coffee Creek downstream of the house. And there are signs of some channeling there, but it's kind of, I would say, working, but failed in terms of just basalt walls if they were ever there before. And then the picture on the right just represents, I thought it was interesting because it shows the utility locates. I think there was some kind of project going on in the area, but those green paint marks on the pavement represent the culvert underneath Ganong Street, and then it turns there actually. So it kind of gets close to the property across the street, turns, goes under their fence, and then is open channel on their side of the fence as well, okay? I just, since we're talking about obstructions, let me go back a minute here. So, the staff report provides what I hoped was enough detail in terms of the process for how the applicant, applies. So they've applied for this. We're required to provide a form for them to apply. So that's the staff requirement that we've done that. Applicants submitted his application and paid his fees. And then, we review, there's several items that they have to provide. In this case, we had a lot of those items already. And line item by line item, I've addressed that in the staff report. I can go through that if need be, but at the end of the day, with encroachments, it's the commission who makes that decision. And, that's it. I think with this one here, one of the things that we have been struggling with is the fact that we've got a lot of obstructions, not just in this neighborhood, there's other neighborhoods where we have them. And I thought, how do we get a picture of what that would look like? We just used Google Earth and had one of our technicians kind of go through it and put a dot on any of the obstructions that are in the right of way. We haven't vetted this completely, but it was just that. It was a Google Earth picture review from the roadway like you would typically look at.
Well,
and
it's
that
pretty
shows
clear
us.
if you drive in Kenema that those streets were platted as streets and that then they weren't built as streets. And so it's, it's pretty hard to drive anywhere in there and not see something that isn't technically encroaching into the right of way.
Right, and for the most part, Kenema functions as Kenema has functioned for a long time. So there's a fair amount of those. We don't want to pursue all those. I'm just trying to give you a sense of, Kenema has some encroachment issues, okay?
Some.
Some.
It's like 70 plus.
That's the obstruction piece. I can move right into the.
Please.
Okay. Okay, so the site distance issue in the Kenema neighborhood is a challenging one. And it's not that different from what we have in a lot of our neighborhoods, to be honest with you. Site distance in Kenema, because of the 60-foot right-of-ways and the 20-foot pavement sections, 20-foot wide pavement sections, is a challenge. And but we have code that talks about site obstructions. And, the idea is to maintain for safe neighborhoods. And, that's really what site distance is about.
The short answer to this question is, does the fence obstruct the sightlines?
The fence is within the site distance triangle. And you can see that in really the picture to the right. As a vehicle, as defined in our code, it meets that, it is within the site distance triangle, okay? Now, the thing that I wanted to point out to you, because this has been a point of contention and I think it's important, the code refers to this manual right here. Found this in my personal library. It actually lists a specific page, and this particular book happens to have it right on the same page. This is a definition of site distance for a highway. a highway. And I think that's the piece that is a little bit challenged. We've got sight distance problems in Kenema along Highway 99. That's a highway. Ganong and Third are not a highway, and that code section, I'd love to fix. We'll change that at some point in time, because I think that, how you measure sight distance in a neighborhood like Kenema is much different than what you would do with a federal highway or a state highway. And so,
Let me ask you this. In your professional opinion, is there a sight line problem at this intersection?
there's not.
Okay, can we move on?
Catch up here. So this is something that came out of the McLaughlin to Kenema Trail. I think it's important because it's a depiction of what's coming for this intersection. And it's something that came out of the McLaughlin to Kenema Trail Plan, which was, dealing with issues associated with concerns at this intersection in particular. So everything that you see on this will happen this summer. We're paving 4th Avenue in end of this month, 1st of September. And after that paving, we are planning to implement what was recommended in the McLaughlin-Kenema Trail Plan for the intersection. That includes these stripes that are shown on here and stop signs. So that will become a 3-way stop sign with the shoulder striping that you have there. Now that had nothing to do with the complaints, as far as I know, the complaints, nor the obstruction application. But it is an adopted plan. It's something that Kelly and I have been working on for a long time. And it's our intent to install that facility as approved by the neighborhood and by the community and by the commission. So multiple staff looked at the.
We've covered this.
We have. Oh, not all of it. The fence also screens Coffee Creek. There's, 2 sides to that. Some would love to see it. From our perspective, that creek is vulnerable. We have, the creeks that we have around town that are exposed like that tend to see a fair amount of vandalism. We see a lot of debris that gets tossed in them. Because Kenema is so dark at night, just like any other dark section of highway, you're gonna see trash get thrown in those areas. And what I like about this fence line is that it, for the most part, people aren't attracted to it. Hasn't become an attractive nuisance. And this property owner does a good job with keeping that garbage that is thrown in that area cleaned up, but it's along the fence line. It's not in the creek. So the fence, I'm going to take a stab at this, but we got the experts here with regard to fencing.
It would be exempt from any code enforcement because it's
in the right of way.
it predates the code.
It's definitely not a new fence. It's there's been updates to the fence, but it's not a new fence. So you're right. In our opinion, the code doesn't apply to this particular fence.
Well,
So that's the bottom line. I'm sorry, what?
There's a second part to that. Any fence in a right of way is essentially uncontrolled, as stated somewhere in these laws.
But we've yeah.
Uncontrolled, you could build the Berlin Wall in a right of way and not be controlled.
Yeah. Except for you have the right to deny that fence, whether it's built to the code or not.
If this had been built out of granite 32 years ago, it would still be okay.
So long as the activity is maintaining so long as the changes happening over time are repairs.
Right.
As long as the chinks out of the granite are being filled with granite,
Right.
then
Okay.
So I'd like to clarify that real quick. So we believe that this is maintenance and repair. That's why you're not even opening the book to see if you're pre-existing, non-conforming, or anything like that.
Right.
It just fits our definition of a maintenance as far as the Historic Review Board policies and materials are concerned, and height.
Does anybody need more information on this before
I
we
don't
get
need more
to the
information,
rest?
but I will say, unfortunately, I respectfully disagree with staff. This is a non-conforming fence as far as I'm concerned.
Well, You're wrong.
And the code does apply. I may be wrong, I'm just saying I disagree with
I
staff,
thought it was
and I'm not arguing
non-conforming
about it, I'm
too.
just saying I
Commissioner
disagree.
Smith.
Is the guardrail, that's the city's guardrail that was there to protect the creek before the fence was?
They don't really
or-
know.
Wait, that's ours. I mean, that's,
I can't, I suspect, I've not asked the question of the applicant, maybe they could answer that, but I believe the guardrail was there before the fence. Yes, seeing that nod.
okay. Well,
So-
I guess my issue with it is, I've looked at it, the sight lines, I don't have an issue with. I now see a better concept of why the sight lines might have been an issue coming down the hill than it is at the actual corner. I kind of see that a little bit now, but the reason the fence is there is right along that section, which clearly is a better prevention for people falling in it than that little guardrail that we have there. So I think to me, having it there is not a bad thing. Whether it's, fits the guidelines, that's the other debate, but.
Well,
And just to-
and to be honest, if, that guardrail wouldn't
stop.
apply to ADA if we were trying to keep somebody from falling in there because
Right.
it's too low.
Right.
And just to remind, you do have 4 folks who want to speak. on
Yeah,
this.
I know, I'm trying to get there.
Okay,
Yeah, I think
we
we
can
can
stop
take-
there.
All right.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
just for the record, we did get comments on this item. We have put them on the record and commissioners have them on their dais.
Can I ask about the INROD
Go ahead.
overlay piece? When I look at that picture, so I don't know what the document's called, planning memo says, since no new fence posts have been added, there is no impervious surface created, and thus the repair of the fence is not subject to INROD review. When I look at that photo, there's absolutely been fence post replacement. So I'm trying to align what this memo says, and when I look at that photo, that's exactly what I see.
The Natural Resource Overlay District exempts existing impervious surfaces. So if there's any impervious surface and you do something else that ends up being impervious, it's exempt. So whether, from the impervious surface standpoint, whether the post was replaced or not is irrelevant.
You saying the post is impervious? Because I just had to replace 4.
I'm saying we protect our streams through the use of vegetated corridors, which are plants. And so oftentimes our natural resource overlay district was adopted after a lot of development had occurred within the vegetated corridor. One of the provisions of the NROD exempt existing impervious surfaces. So if any work happens, if you have a paved driveway near a stream and you do something on that paved driveway, but say you put a fence
Net
on the
result was
paved,
the same.
and so water couldn't penetrate the ground before, still can't penetrate the ground after, it's exempt from NROD review.
So this statement isn't correct then?
And they didn't expand any impervious surface. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, let's take the public testimony. Paul Edgar and Karen Blaha.
Good afternoon, Paul Edgar, Kanema. This is a stockade-style fence which is prohibited by 1740 code on Ganong Street. 100 feet of this fence that goes from, on the other side is brand new in a whole new location, and it goes through an NROD area where it never was before, and it pokes holes, fence post holes right on top of the pipes, and there was never a fence there. Now the fence could only be 42 inches high and not stockade. And so if this fence was reduced to a non-stockade style, and it was 42 inches high, you could then say, I'll approve it where it is, because I want to allow what is virtually an annexation, where I'm going to take this property because that fence starts and goes right up and through and incorporates this property, our property, city property, and makes it their own, and no one else can see it, use it, or have access to it. And I just find that's a crazy precedence that somebody is setting out, where all of a sudden you decide you want to gift them this. Now, by code, whenever they quoted it earlier, greater than 30% of this structure, a whole contiguous structure, was rebuilt, but over 100 feet of it is brand new. Well,
Hey, won't have any of that.
okay. So this is the fence that goes right along the property line of the house at 302 3rd Avenue, between it and the house at 310. That part of the fence is incontestable in the facts that it is brand new, 100 feet of it, because it was never there in that site. The fence was completely over on another property. Now, if you want, and then it goes through an NROD area without any review, and it should have. It should have been in full compliance. And the view of a historic property, we talk about this. This is a important historic structure, and it's completely taken out of the view of people coming in and visiting Kenema for the purpose of understanding some of the history of Kenema. Thank you.
Can I ask Mr. Edgar a question?
One.
Would you object to this fence along the road if it were 42 inches and not of the stockade type?
I would, it would be much more tolerant, but it would provide the necessary view for people to be able to see an important asset of Kenema. But I still think it's a terrible precedence to allow
Your time is
stockade.
done, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Karen Blah, then Linda Basinger.
Thank you. My name is Karen Blaha. I live in the Kenema area, and the National Historic District is only a part of the Kenema area. All of Kenema neighborhood is not the National Historic Area, just to clarify. So I've lived here for 25 years in 2 historic houses, contributing houses. And so I've gone by this property for 25 years, and I've never noticed any problems. And so I'm surprised that this is an issue, and I don't know where this ever came from. I don't know who's complaining about it. I read the Public Works Director's analysis in the staff report, and to me it appears logical, scientific, and I strongly support the Public Works Director's point of view and recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you. Basinger.
I'm Linda Basinger, and I've lived in Kenema for 21 years. When I bought my home in Kenema, I bought it because it was in Kenema, and Kenema is quirky, and that had great appeal to me. I like the quirkiness of this. I'm also a realtor. I've sold many homes in Kenema. One of the homes that have sold in Kenema, we were doing a walk through the home, and the homeowner said, "Oh, this back porch, which is now a utility room, it's not on my property." Oops, okay, so we disclosed that. It's not an alleyway, it's a street. The home was built in the 1920s or before. We didn't keep records of homes before 1920. Nobody cared. It's not a big deal. We just moved on. The utility room is still there. It has not been a problem. And this fence is just another quirky thing that happens. It's been there for 32 years. No one's cared. It's been a great fence. It does its project. I've read John's information as well, so it sounds like they did a great job with this. Third-party opinions, no less, so that's great. This just a great fence. It's not a hazard. They're going to put stop signs in there. That takes care of it. I fully recommend that this be accepted as well. New homeowners going forward, yeah, let's have your fences on the front property line, park on your property line if you want those amenities. But those are existing, guys. There's 70 of them. There's only 200 homes in Kenema. It's everywhere. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mark Matheson.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Matheson. I've lived here in Oregon City for over 26 years. I believe I'm the only other civil engineer in the room. If I'm mistaken, please raise your hand. But the fact of the matter is, when the Public Works Director refers to right-of-ways, he's misleading people. Because in Kenema, I've looked at the plats. The plats there's a difference. There's right-of-ways and easements. The director refuses to quantify an easement versus a right-of-way. Now, I know as a GIS person, I'm one of these people back in 1992 that actually converted all the parcel base from the natural gas maps. That's how you got your parcel base that you know now. We extracted them from the natural gas, and then we converted them into GIS. It was a long process. But the fact of the matter is, you cannot look at Kenema and say, this road is a right-of-way, because they're easements. I've looked at the plats, I've looked at the legal identification, and they're not. Those roads that are supposedly roads, they are easements. And if you're not going to build a road on it, there's no reason to call it a right-of-way. It's a technical issue, but it's misleading you guys to think that a right-of-way is the same as an easement. I've had this conversation with the Public Works Director many times, but the fact of the matter is, you cannot have this confusion between easements and right-of-ways. So if you clarify your basic or your foundation for your argument, you might find that the argument isn't as complicated, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? Is the applicant still out there? Does he want to say something? Karen?
My name's John Edelman. I live at 302 Third Avenue. Been there since December of '86. Put the fence up in the spring of '87. There was a row of arborvitae there where the fence line is now that Carl Kaufman put in there when he restored the house in 1985. The fence has been there, in my opinion, guarding that creek from people throwing stuff in there and people getting hurt. The guardrail that was crashed into by Mr. Edgar about 10 years ago is all bent over, you can see, towards my fence. That's not protection enough to keep people or anything out of that creek. I'm not saying that fence does that, but it deters people. We've got a new problem at the old Kenema Park. Everybody knows about that, I'm sure. The people that were up on the cliff are now down there at that park. Major, I've talked to the mayor numerous times. They throw stuff at my garbage cans every day. I walked up to that park just last week. I used to walk that trail quite a bit. I don't even feel safe walking up to that park anymore. I found a ceramic dope pipe right there on the ground, parking lot, a couple of empty bags of weed. And that's what's going on up at my park that I see from my driveway every day. And that doesn't seem to be a concern, but this fence certainly does. As far as I'm concerned, my fence protects the city from anybody falling in there, garbage going in there, which is obviously going to go downstream and under my house. It's a fragile ecosystem right there. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm conserving that. That's my part of taking care of Kenema. Keep my place neat, clean, and I take care of the property that right-of-way entails. That's all I have.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, me too.
So when you built the fence in '86, were there any city codes about fencing? Did you have to apply for a permit or anything like that?
Nothing.
Okay.
The section that has been in that photograph that's fairly new, when was that put in, the new section?
September of '17.
But you just replaced
That was replacement. That was all replacement wood.
Right. I guess my question, if we're debating about, if the fence was there way before there was a process to do it, that's one thing. But when you're replacing a section that large.
What does it matter how big the section is?
Well, my point is if we get down to the point that we have to debate whether or not that's acceptable in that neighborhood, it would have been nice to know that before you did that section and got a permit at that point. That way we could have said,
I didn't think a permit was required to replace and repair my fence.
Right.
Why would I?
Commissioner Smith?
I just pay my taxes and mind my own business. That's all I do.
Any other questions to the applicant? All right, thank you, sir, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jeff, you fill out a card? Come on up.
I'm Patty Webb.
You need to sit down at the microphone so we can hear you.
Okay, well, I'm Patty Webb. I live at 310 3rd Avenue next to Mr. Adelman. The fence that you see in the picture is a very big side obstruction. I hear people screeching their tires all day, and Mr. Adelman yelling at them. Sometimes he stands out there with a hose. Sometimes he puts big boulders on the corner. The fence on the other side, which is on my property, technically is actually on my property, is brand new. It did not exist. There were 2 panels of boards when I first moved in, which were way up at the top of the hill, nowhere near the creek. They were on my property by, I believe, 3 feet. I talked to the Adelmans and I told them it was on my property. They agreed, said they would take it down. They'd had the same dispute with the people that lived there before. After a year, I said, you said you were gonna take the fence down. You haven't done that. I'm gonna take it down now. They said they had no problem with that, but then that's when the problem started. And I was told by Public Works that that fence was definitely on my property and I had a right to take it down. All I did was pull a piece of twine and the entire thing fell down on the ground. It was tied to a tree. So there was not an existing fence there. There were 2 panels which were not maintained. It was dangerous. It was rotten. The rot went up this far from the ground, which is gonna happen to this fence too, because it's clear down on the ground. It's sitting on cement. It's a poorly built, constructed fence. And Mr. Lewis' department put something on my property description on the Oregon City GIS maps describing the agreement I was coerced into by threatening me with thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, and putting liens on my house and confiscating my property through eminent domain if I did not sign an agreement to uphold this fence for 10 years or get a huge fine. That devalues my house. It doesn't have any business being on the website, and it just makes my house look bad. It's for nothing but harassment. This has been for harassment the entire time. Our neighborhood association is enjoying it because they don't like Mr. Edgar and they don't like me and they don't like Friends of Kenema. That's the only reason they're here tonight. So when you think about the comments they made, consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to testify? Seeing none. This is a pretty simple item, actually, and although I understand there's emotions on both sides of the issue, this really is a question that we have answered numerous times throughout the city, whether we're talking about the bluff over Waterbury Park or other areas where the city owns a street or a right-of-way, and folks have, pushed their yard 20 feet into the right-of-way because there's unlikely that the city's ever going to use that. So it seems to me that the fence is there. I personally have driven it. I know at least Commissioner O'Donnell has driven it.
Yes.
I'm currently driving a small car. I have no trouble seeing either direction, going either downhill or uphill there. Like I said, this is something we've done many, many, many times, and this is a revocable right-of-way obstruction permit. So if at any time the city decides that we're going to come in and we're going to widen Ganong or we're going to widen Third, we can always take that back. So I see no reason why we shouldn't approve this.
I have a question for Kelly.
Go ahead.
Kelly, on your very well-written report on page 7, you have a diagram there that shows a front yard 3.5 feet maximum and a corner side yard 3.5 feet maximum as per HRB policies, and you have the blue area. Mm-hmm. Just to clarify, in my mind, you're saying that So you say a small portion of the fence in question is 6 feet high in the corner side between the house, even though the maximum height is 3.5 feet, right? Okay,
That's
just want to
correct.
make sure I was reading that correctly.
Is that it?
That's correct. And that's in reference to, you know, if somebody was building a new fence,
Great,
that policy would apply.
great. Okay, thank you,
I
I
have a
appreciate it.
question. What year was the 3.5 feet instituted?
The HRB fence policy was
Yes.
adopted in 1988.
No, this isn't just HRB policy, though.
It is. The citywide policy allows 6-foot fences in corner side yards, but the HRB policy is more restrictive to 3.5 feet in corner side yards.
So if I were to summarize this wide-ranging
One
bunch of
second,
issues.
Commissioner Smith, do you have a question?
I'm sorry, please.
No, I was gonna make a comment.
Oh.
He's probably about to make it.
Go ahead.
Well, we ranged far and wide. You know,
Right.
We talked about a conflict between the joining parties that's of a private nature, the other part of the fence, which is not our purview tonight. The gentleman testified he built this fence in '85. At that time, the height restrictions did not exist. I don't know, this thing about intrusion into the right-of-way, that's a point of law, and I get it. Is there a public benefit to having a fence there? Obviously so. Would it be more palatable if it were 3.5 feet? It appears like it would be. I'm going to summarize without casting a vote here immediately. I don't have a problem with the sight distance, and I've been down there 3 or 4 times struggling with it. And I have a bigger problem with the gentleman's Suburban parked on the corner being a sight obstruction than I do the fence. So.
Which we have no control over.
Which we have no control. I mean, I have to understand what this commission does have a control over and what it does not. What is the purview of the HRB? What is our purview as commissioners? And we're talking about intrusions into the right of way. You know, when was the fence built? What were the restrictions in place at the time? And, you know, I face a similar thing about, you know, they call them ex post facto laws or retroactive laws. And I'm considering all that based on what I'm hearing tonight.
Commissioner Smith, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because I think, one, this would have gone over a lot better had he clearly replaced that section of fence, and had he replaced it at a height or in compliance with HRB policies that were already in place, it would have diminished the, I think, the amount of consternation about this fence. Because it clearly does not meet HRB policy. I know it doesn't have to because it's in the right of way, and those are changes I think that this commission needs to address.
Yes.
And that is an area where we can take this. So I guess I just want to make that very clear. The fence is not compliant with HRB. It's not compliant with the in-rod overlay. It should have had a review because it clearly replaced fence post. And so,
I'm not, there's no definition of kind of new fence versus repair, right? So that's
Right.
that's the real thing that we hung our hat on, which was this was a repair to an existing, yes, non-compliant fence. But the code allows for those kind of repairs.
so I guess I would say in general, my general concern is that we're not addressing Kanema as a whole.
As is
And-
mine.
And yes, we can revoke this at any time, but we're not fixing the real issue. And I haven't figured out what the urgency is for this one versus us just saying, you know, how do we tackle Kanema as a whole? How do we want to fix some of these issues? So I'm trying to figure out why there's such urgency, you know, for this applicant. Does it matter? I mean, is it a big deal?
There's urgency because of all of the
The complaints.
neighborhood dynamics, yeah. And so they just wanted to get taken care of. And like I said, we've done this on numerous, I don't know if you were on the commission at the time, but we did it for a couple of properties up on the bluff over Waterworld Park. You know, there's other places in the McLaughlin district that have, you know, dealt with these kinds of issues. So I hang my hat on the fact that you can't regulate something that you didn't today that you weren't regulating it at the time. So if the fence was built in 1986 and the Historic Review Board wasn't even established until 1988,
It was established in 82.
then there wasn't any code in place at the time the fence was built that said he couldn't build the fence at 6 feet high. So replacing pieces of it is just maintenance. Commissioner
I'll
O'Donnell?
comment further. You know, we don't have any 30% rule like we did on the other construction. I wish that these kind of things could be resolved among neighbors without coming to this board to arbitrate them and try to fix them.
Right.
To comment on something Commissioner Lyle Smith said, there's at least 70 other locations that we could face this individually. We've got streets that are 20 foot wide with a 32 foot, whatever you want to call it, right away or whatever, or that we could potentially put a 32 foot street there on a 60 foot right of way. Look at the topography. Are we really going to do that in Kenema at any point in time, the way those hills roll and all? I mean, maybe we should take a global approach to this. And from a historic perspective, do you really, even if we could, do you want to put 32 foot wide streets in Kenema? Do you want to change that character? So what are we fighting about here, you know, as far as that?
I mean, I think you could go in and survey the street network the way it is, and anything that's outside of that goes back to whoever was closest.
Yeah, but this is much ado about nothing in the end, because we don't want to change the character of Kenema. 20-foot streets are its character.
Commissioner Smith, you have anything?
You
don't feel like you have to.
So, well, I agree with all these points that have been made, but I want to fix this issue. And my question was basically that if the homeowner would have came to us to get a permit at the time you replaced that huge section, this could have been a dialogue that would have been a lot simpler by saying, hey, this is the way you need to replace it, and it's a done deal. So how do we communicate to the neighbors in that neighborhood and all those people that, you know, if there's a fence in the, you know, how do we deal with the whole neighborhood so that this doesn't become an issue constantly? I don't have a problem with the sightlines. I don't have a problem with the, you know, having the fence in its location, because I think it does actually, you know, keep people from falling in that creek. I do agree with Paul's point, though. It's a very important, it's one of the most unique features in that neighborhood, and so there is some, you know, ability to, I remember taking people to Kenema just to point out the creek that goes into the house. I mean, it is a cool thing, so I agree with that point, that it's one of those attributing features to what is an entire neighborhood that's a historic district. So when we had comments tonight that said that it's just parts, that's wrong, right, Denise? The whole district. And so, I mean, we do this all the time, the encroachment, I don't have a problem with it. I just want to be in a place where we are not allowing new fences to go up that are outside of the rules that we've set. And how do we fix all the other places that, you know? And do we let this one slip by and then try to fix the rest, or do we address it? It's complicated, because I think it would have been simple just a year ago for him to come and the owner to say, hey, I'm replacing this section of fence. Probably knew a year ago, I think this fight's been going on at least a year or more, that was in the right of way.
Let me ask a question. So Laura or John, either one, if this homeowner had come to you and said, I'm gonna replace this section of fence because it's, you know, it's warped or whatever, what would you have told him?
Honestly, I would have said, I'm not the fence guy. Go talk to Laura. Okay. That's what I said on the other one too. It was like, the rules are.
Okay, you answered my question, Laura.
Okay, I'm gonna give you the different perspectives. From the Natural Resource Overlay District, repair and maintenance of a fence is exempt, as long as you don't add additional impervious surfaces, regardless of if you have no poles or not.
Okay.
So from that perspective, it would have been exempt. From the HRB policy perspective, maintenance is also exempt. Yeah. And from height, we regulate height on private property. There are no regulations for height on public property, you get to help decide what the height ought to be when you do these obstruction permits.
So then to me, the only issue was the fence there 32 years ago, and we haven't seen the pictures that supposedly say that. At least some people are saying it wasn't there. Some people are saying it was there. It
No,
comes
I've
down
never,
to
I've
me.
never heard anybody say it wasn't there.
Paul said it wasn't there. Tonight.
No.
So I guess that's the only issue I have. If we knew that for a definition, whether or not that was true or not, that would help me completely. But I don't have an issue with.
I think you were hearing testimony about a fence that was built on the backside.
Right, that was different.
Versus the one on Ganong, which is in the right of way. We have two different fences.
Yeah.
Okay, then I don't really have,
Is there a motion?
I want to make one more statement, then I'm done. You're saying that if it was a 6-foot fence before, you can replace it with a 6-foot fence now, correct?
You're talking about height of fence in the
Yes.
right of way?
Yeah.
We still do not regulate the height in the
Disregarding-
right of way. Oh,
Well,
on
and that's the
private
second
property?
question. We have got to address that there are absolutely no controls in the right of way.
Okay, well, that's
That's
for
a
a different
different
day.
question.
On private property, you can do maintenance of your fence, so yes.
And replacement of a section of fence in the existing alignment is maintenance, not new construction. Right?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a motion, please?
did you have anything?
Making a motion?
Okay.
I disagree.
Well, then say that you disagree.
I'm fine.
Okay. Move to approve resolution number 19-2029, revocable long-term obstruction in the right-of-way at 302 Third.
Is there a second?
All right, then I guess what's the discussion then?
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion. I move that we not approve the revocable permit for this property at 302 Third Avenue.
Okay, we seem to be at an impasse, and the question I have here now is what exactly do you guys want to do?
My hope is that these people could work together and possibly do a 42-inch fence that would be palatable to everybody.
Have you seen the Hatfields in McCoy?
I have.
Yes.
I have. I know what we've got going on here.
Part of the problem, Dan, is that even though, I respect your comments and I understand where you're coming from, but just because we've approved right-of-way permits before, it doesn't mean that every case is the same case. And I would say that I think I remember I came to the city commission and I testified against us allowing for the encroachment on the bluff above because we had a trail there and we should not be having people's property in where a dedicated trail was going to be. But I was assured by John that if we build that trail, that all that stuff is going to go away.
That's right.
But again, that's not the same situation as this, so I don't support this request.
So, well, let me ask you this. If we don't give them this and they can leave the fence there, what is the city going to use that 18 feet for?
It doesn't matter whether we use it or not.
Well, you just said it mattered because you were going to have a trail someday and you were assured that.
No, the one on the top.
No, I know, but the point is still the same. If the city has no use for that, what's the point?
I guess is the real question that we're not voting one way or another is because we want to fix the bigger problem until we come back to this?
Yes.
Well, then we should have said that, because I am okay with that too, but, because I think
Yeah, we
it
could have
is.
saved 45 minutes of time.
Exactly.
Approaching attack.
So
Well,
then,
the
can we
other
make a
option is-
motion then?
The other option is to make this go away for now. It's a temporary, it's revocable,
Yeah.
and there's others in the Kanema neighborhood that if we do a overall fix, it may be that we revoke several of them for
Sure.
whatever the fix is.
So Commissioner Smith, is your motion still?
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Let's move in second and call the roll, please.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
No.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
and Mayor Dan Holliday.
I don't have my voting button. Aye.
I don't either.
There we
Neither did
go.
I.
I think we've made it pretty clear though that we
Goodness
need to,
gracious.
we need to talk about how we're gonna address Kanema.
Yes.
And it needs to be a pretty high priority.
It
Okay.
does.
So we are now at 10 o'clock. And according to the rules of the commission, we are going to, I'm going to ask if you guys want to continue on until no later than 11 PM.
I'm fine with
okay
it.
with
I
that.
want to get the two resolutions done to ordinance first
Is-
readings,
Yes.
Okay.
7A, 7B.
Is there a motion on the floor to continue?
What?
I need a motion.
No, we're not. General business, 19-456, first reading of
We're
ordinance.
not, we're
Do we need a motion
What?
we have to make a motion to continue.
after
we do?
10?
Yeah.
I move we continue.
All right. Moved and second, call the roll.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
And Mayor Dan Holliday.
All right. 19-46, first reading of ordinance number 19-1011, business food waste requirements. Mr. Lewis, let's make this short, please.
Can we dispense with the report?
We can just vote. I mean, this has been before you in work
I'm ready to
session.
vote.
So,
I'm ready to go.
Mayor, tell me what I'm to do.
Our meetings become.
This is an ordinance, so it needs
Is
to be
everybody
read.
clear what this does?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I move for the first reading of ordinance number 19-1011, business food waste requirements.
I'll second.
Comment.
Go ahead.
I just, the mayor has brought issues up with this topic before when we had Metro come speak about it. When we had B&B leasing here, I think they were very kind.
They were.
Very nice. And I was a little surprised by that. I mean, they're nice people. They're always nice. I don't mean that. But what I mean is, I was way more reluctant about the unanswered questions,
Mm-hmm.
as you are, about how much it's going to cost.
Who's gonna pay for it?
B&B leasing didn't really want to get into that conversation, but hesitant a little bit. You could tell. So I have concerns
As do I.
about that.
Do you know how much a new garbage truck costs? It's close to
$500,000.
$500,000 roughly, and in order to do this effectively, they would have to buy one new truck just to contain the food waste because they can't mix and match between the trucks.
Right, and their approach, the approach was kind of, well, we'll see how it goes and then we'll deal with the rates. And I'm like, well, I don't know if we wanted to wait till we find out how much it's gonna cost
Right.
before we deal with it. So I have concerns.
So we did hear those concerns pretty loud and clear, and we've talked about them, amongst the agencies. What we included in the report was hopefully some assurance that we need to deal with the rates.
Right.
This is due, is March 1st, I think, is when the first, when it has to happen. We want to get that dealt with by the end of this year. So we have rates established, so that's working with B&B Leasing. Metro is also working diligently on affirming delivery locations, right, to make sure that's right. And so, I mean, I think
I just
working
wanted
with
at
both
least
B&B
to-
Leasing and our business community to make, and I feel like we're getting good
It
commitments.
sounds like the dialogue has been good. I just,
Right.
I think there's some
Incomplete.
concern about all of us, worrying about that.
The
So I just
elephant in
want
the
that.
room is,
Right.
Metro has no place to take this stuff yet.
That they have places, it's just not locally here. And they're working on those agreements with those landfills. And I that's what they've told us.
Landfills?
The transfer stations.
WRI.
Yeah, so there's, I don't remember all the locations right now, but yeah, there was a handful of locations that they were looking at.
All right, anyway,
It's a motion.
Is there a motion
and
and a second?
Yes. Yeah, made and seconded.
motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
The ordinance.
First reading.
First reading, ordinance number 19-1011, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City amending the Oregon City Municipal Code by adding a new chapter 8.26, business food waste requirements.
Call roll.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
No.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
And Mayor Dan Holliday.
I'm going to vote no, and because the fact is that I think this is a half-baked idea that some Portland liberals have decided that we're going to try to ram this down everybody's throat in all the different neighborhoods. So I vote no.
I didn't comment, but my comments are similar, and the thing isn't fleshed out. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm not going to do the first part before I have the answers to the second part, so that's why I voted no.
We'll try to bring you back.
Oh, I want to vote no now.
Yeah, I didn't
You can change your vote.
Nope.
We hear you loud and clear. We'll
No,
bring
hold
back-
on. A motion to reconsider can be made by someone who voted in the affirmative.
Are you kidding? No.
Well, I guess I wasn't hearing the same concern. I have concerns about it. And so, I mean, I think we all have concerns, but I didn't think the concerns were gonna cause you to vote no on it. We were gonna get staff, you know, and get
We do
back.
have businesses in Oregon City that are doing it voluntarily. And I think B&B Leasing is a partner in this. They're recognizing the value in this. It's just, yeah, there's some questions that they had, right? And Metro has established.
Certainly different from the conversations I've had with B&B Leasing.
I can sit and recite all the concerns that I had from that night because I was chairing that meeting.
I guess at what point does it come back? I mean, is this a move ahead and we're just hoping whatever happens, happens and it
Well,
works
actually,
out?
it's
or
the
we-
first reading, so we have a chance to kill it next time.
Okay.
All right,
That's fine.
so we'll
That's
move on.
fine. I can do that.
So is this the reason we asked the Clackamas County folks to sit here and wait is it for this topic?
Well, yes, we let them know that we were having the meeting. We knew it was going to be a long meeting, and they've elected both Clackamas County and Metro to be here. I don't know if they want to bring anything else.
So I guess, is there anything that they could bring the next time to help
Make us-
this
Yeah,
move
some
this?
answers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless they have.
The concerns were voiced at the last meeting. You know, where to take it, compensation to the people that get involved, to the companies. How long does that compensation last? When does it go away? Who bears the ultimate cost? Those questions still persist.
A lot of questions.
Moving on, first reading of ordinance number, so we've done that, right?
Yeah.
We did the first reading of 19-1012.
Thank you, okay, all right. First reading of 19-1012, 20-mile-an-hour speed limit policy in the Keneman neighborhood. Mr. Lewis.
Okay, so thank you for reading the recommendation. This one we also brought to you in a work session before. We heard concerns about making sure that, a couple of the concerns were that the way we had proposed it was looking at all the family-friendly routes throughout the city, and they're not in a particular neighborhood, right? They're in a particular area. So there was concern about confusion about how those postings would be perceived by the regular driver. And there was concerns that the neighborhoods weren't bringing this. It felt more like a staff-initiated initiative, right? So in the discussions that we've been having, and a lot of it kind of was precipitated by the trail plan and the ideas that maybe what we could do to slow neighborhood traffic through the Keneman neighborhood. The Keneman neighborhood actually requested that they be considered for this 20-mile-per-hour designation. Our feeling on that is that area meets kind of the area concerns that would kind of limit this confusion about how fast the posted speed is. We can post these speed limits at the entrances to Kenema, both off 99E and off of South End Road. So and in this neighborhood, the requirements are that it's a neighborhood, that the 85th percentile speed is less than 30 miles per hour, which is clearly the case, and that the average volume on these streets is less than 2,000 vehicles per day. It meets that as well. So we're bringing to you this ordinance that establishes a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit in the neighborhood. We'll sign it. It'll go along with all the other improvements that we're doing, the improvements that I showed you at the intersection, and there's several other improvements that include bike and pedestrian legends on the pavement to indicate that, some sign riders that kind of tell you that you're in a different neighborhood, a family-friendly neighborhood. So there you go.
Is there a motion?
Yes, I move the first reading of ordinance 19-1012, 20-mile-an-hour speed limit policy in the Kenema neighborhood. And I'd like to see this be a precedent.
I think somebody wants to.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so,
Then we'll have discussion or.
Mr. Edgar?
Thank you. Paul Edgar, Kanema. In fact, I was on the Trails Committee, okay, and we made the recommendation along with the Friends of Kanema to make this happen. It was one of those initiatives that did not come out of the neighborhood association itself. And we are in favor. The roads in Kanema, as we've talked about enough, are dangerous. And we have a lot of kids going in and out now. It just seems like now that you've taken them off of the bluff, they come down to Kanema to do their drug deals, go out and camp out in the Metro Bluff. But there's a lot of speeding. And I've wanted to even put a sign out in front of my house because I have deer coming across all the time, a deer warning sign, because I don't want to see a deer as an ornament, hood ornament. But please okay it. It's got a consensus agreement. Thank you.
Comments, questions?
I have a quick question. So you're calling this a pilot program, so what exactly are we testing?
Well, for one, there was some apprehension on the commission at the time about doing this. So for us, it's making sure, establishing how much it's costing us to do the signage, making sure we're, doing this. Are we going to do it in other places? Kanema's unique in the way that it kind of sits there as a project. We're not proposing removing them, if that's what you're asking, after a year, for instance. It's really just kind of, this is our first toe in the water. So maybe that's a better way of saying it with the 20-mile-per-hour thing.
Okay.
You know,
So it's
usually,
not-
go ahead.
Yeah, usually a pilot is you're testing something and you're gonna revisit it in some point and see if we remove it or something. I was a little confused by that. That's
Sorry.
not really the plan.
It's more of this is our first attempt
Okay.
at kind of sharing it with the commission. And so, yeah, but once it's adopted, it's our intent to leave it that way.
Okay, have you consulted with the police department on how they could do speed checks in the neighborhood? I know it's tight roads and all, but it would be really great to kind of put the speed gun on people after the speed limit's been lowered.
So
Even if it was a warning program to let them know, hey, we've lowered the speed limit and you guys are,
Effective warnings would be helpful, but yeah, their traffic officers can sit down there, be visible, and raise awareness.
I think that would be really helpful.
I think what I heard from the chief was it's hard to do
think
some
it
of
would
the
be
traffic
hard, but-
management,
Yeah.
like enforcement, because of the narrowness of
Yeah.
the streets. It's I suppose you can back into a driveway. I don't know.
Well, the fact is, it's pretty hard to get to 30 miles an hour in Kanema, except in a couple of stretches.
It's hard to get to 20 miles an hour. So yeah, but I think it will be effective. It sends a good message to those that are using it with the signage, and if the police can, whatever they can do to monitor that. I think what I've heard from Jim is they're up to the task.
Well, I'm going to say the same comment I said the last time, and that is, it is a fool's errand now I'm going to vote for this one for Kanema because of the trail work and all that other stuff we've done. But it's a fool's errand to try to extend this out into the neighborhood citywide, because the fact is enforcement is the only thing that's going to work. And our traffic enforcement is doing traffic enforcement in the places that save lives and are preventing crashes. So they're not going to have time to go out and sit on Rivercrest Avenue waiting for some guy to go 30 miles an hour. So you're spending the money to do signage, and people are going to ignore those signs anyway, just like they ignore 35-mile-an-hour signs.
Well, once again, I find myself agreeing with the mayor. However, I think Kanema needs the 20-mile-per-hour signs. I agree the sign never stopped a violator. Enforcement does, and if that means you're sitting on your bicycle with a battery pack and your radar gun and you light up a couple people, then do it.
It wouldn't
And,
take much to,
Yeah, and maybe we consider some mechanical devices to slow them down too. I don't know. Maybe some traffic engineering to slow them down. Although it's already 20 feet wide.
Mr. O'Donnell, I think if people get the message that they're gonna get a ticket, that will stop that. It works in Milwaukee.
It works everywhere.
So without further question, let's call a roll.
Can I read the
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Sure.
ordinance number 19-1012, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City establishing a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit on 3rd Avenue, 4th Avenue, 5th Avenue, Apperson Street, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, Jerome Street, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, Miller Street, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, and 4th Street to 5th Street, Hedges Street, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, and Ganong Street, all located within the Kenema neighborhood.
Call a roll.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
And Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye.
I'd like to move the consent agenda.
Second.
Call a roll.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
And Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. We're going to suspend communications and end this meeting.
I would love that.
Well done.
Adjourn.